Those are people from the Lu Yun family clan? Si Yes' eyes swept over a group of people not far away. The Lu Yun family clan is renowned worldwide, and the cultivators produced from this family clan were all deeply powerful. Family clans like the Si and Yi family seemed especially tiny before ones like Lu Yun's. Yi Qingtang followed Si Yes' gaze, and as expected, she saw a group of finely dressed people with elegant demeanors. Leading the group of people was a tall middle-aged man with an extraordinary bearing, and he was quietly talking to a young man. When Yi Qingtang's gaze fell on the male who listened with lowered eyes, something shone in her eyes uncontrollably. "Qingtang, quickly leave." On a stormy night, that handsome youth stood in front of her with his flesh and blood, bearing a fatal blow. "Senior brother Yun?" Yi Qingtang mumbled softly as she looked at the side profile of the youth. "Qingtang, do you know the people from the Lu Yun family clan?" Si Yi seemed to have sensed Yi Qingtang's abnormal behavior and could not help but ask. Yi Qingtang returned to her senses and shook her head immediately. It was she who owed him. In her previous life, when Yi Qingtang entered the Xianling sect, she experienced difficulty in learning anything due to the absence of spirit root and was, thus, ridiculed by some senior and junior brothers. More than that, she was bullied for not having a family clan background. The only person in Xianling sect who treated her well was senior brother Yun Shu. But ultimately, Yun Shu died for her, but she did not even have the ability to seek revenge for him. The only warmth in her previous life was slashed away hard on that stormy night. Si did not think much into it and was slightly shocked as he looked at the crowd. He had always known that it was hard to enter a sect but never expected that despite so, there were even the formidable Heavens Royals here apart from the Lu Yun family clan. Every candidate participating in the entrance assessment had extraordinary backgrounds such that any random person picked out would have a glorious background. And only people with such a social status would attract a mighty figure to recommend them. "Big brother Si, there's still a while more until the assessment. You don't need to accompany me. Do head back first," Yi Qingtang said with a smile. Si Yi originally wanted to stay and accompany Yi Qingtang, but on second thought, if Yi Qingtang failed, she may be embarrassed to face him. Thus, he gave a few orders and descended the mountain without saying anything more, deciding to wait a while more in the carriage at the bottom of the mountain. Once Si Yi left, Yi Qingtang stood at the summit alone. Her small frame and outstanding appearance attracted much attention. However, the reactions she got were less of shock and more of mockery. "Who is that girl? She can't be here to participate in the sect assessment also? Doesn't look like it." All the candidates for the sect assessment today were escorted by many people from their family and had the company of a powerful person who recommended them. Just now, I saw that there was only one young man beside that girl, and he had left. It doesn't seem like they're here for the assessment. Perhaps she's here to see the world. After all, this path to heaven cannot be traversed by normal people. The people who came today had extremely high expectations and could see that Yi Qingtang's lone self was a misfit in this bustling and flourishing age. Yi Qingtang was not at all bothered by those discussions and stood there calmly as she eyed the cloudy horizon. In the previous life, she waited for the path to heaven, the path leading to the sect, to open by herself just like this. Ridicule and coldness, she had long suffered them in her previous life. How would it still bother her in this life? Not anyone can enter a sect. A cold and arrogant voice suddenly traveled into Yi Qingtang's ears. Yi Qingtang took a glance towards the direction of the voice, but what followed immediately was a dissipating of warmth in her eyes and a tug up the corners of her lips. An elegantly dressed young man overflowing with arrogance was standing a few steps away from Yi Qingtang. Beside him were a few servants waiting upon him carefully. The person who spoke was Lu Xiuwen, the fifth prince of one of the countries in the formidable Heavens dynasty. The formidable Heavens royals were in control of the current dynasty and held a superior position. The formidable Heavens dynasty built by them was a magnificent dynasty formed by many countries and commanded by the emperor of the formidable Heavens royals. The royal families of each country were all from the formidable Heavens royals, and Lu Xiuwen was a prince from one of the many countries in the formidable Heavens dynasty. He had a rather high ability and a proud character. Lu Xiuwen was someone more than familiar to Yi Qingtang. In her previous life when Yi Qingtang entered the sect, she did not have a spirit root and her cultivation was slow. Then, Lu Xiuwen was rather popular amongst the disciples. Yi Qingtang suffered quite a lot of bullying from him and was even made to do things that only a handyman would do. Furthermore, he did not allow her to focus on cultivation like other normal disciples. However, Yi Qingtang was not too bothered by all of that. What really made Yi Qingtang remember Lu Xiuwen was his betrayal. At that time, Yi Qingtang and Lu Xiuwen were out together to deal with matters but were attacked by a high-level spirit animal on the journey. They were unable to defeat it, and when they almost lost their lives, it was the heart of the demon god in Yi Qingtang that unleashed its powers, ultimately saving Lu Xiuwen and the other disciples. Yet, it was that time when Yi Qingtang's heart of the demon god was completely exposed. Lu Xiuwen did not take into consideration that she saved his life and simply spread the news all over the world. Not only was Yi Qingtang forced out of Xianling's sect, but her secret regarding the heart of the demon god could no longer be hidden, resulting in the tragedy of being wanted for her life by everyone. It's not up to you to say who can enter and who cannot, Yi Qingtang scoffed coldly as she looked straight at Lu Xiuwen's rather good-looking face. Lu Xiuwen frowned slightly. As a prince, there were rarely people who would rebut him like this. His face sunk immediately, and he swept a gaze at Yi Qingtang, revealing a look of belittlement when he saw that Yi Qingtang was alone. A sect is prestigious. Many people want to climb up to it, but they should still have some self-awareness. No company by family clan nor send-off from a powerful person. Such an abject person could also come to participate in a sect assessment. The servants beside Lu Xiuwen obviously echoed Lu Xiuwen and went along with his words continuously. Fifth Prince, you have a noble identity. Why fight with people like this? Just let those overconfident people be. Then, shall know that not just anyone can enter a sect. Yi Qingtang raised her brows, and her smile deepened as she looked at the lackeys beside Lu Xiuwen. Noble identity? Everyone is equal before the sect. Even if you're related to the royal family, don't you still have to wait for the assessment like ordinary people? Lu Xiuwen's slightly better expression suddenly turned ugly again because of Yi Qingtang's words. Yi Qingtang did not say anything wrong. Even if he was a noble prince, he still had to participate in the assessment like everyone else, and whether he was able to enter was dependent on his level of talent. The compliments from the servants earlier on now made Lu Xiuwen a little shameful. The argument between Yi Qingtang and Lu Xiuwen attracted much attention. Everyone looked over one after another only to be surprised at their realization. That young girl who was by herself actually got into a conflict with the fifth prince of the formidable Heavens Royals. Yun Shu, who was chatting with his family clan people, turned around as well. When Yun Shu looked at the calm and breathtaking girl standing alone in front of Lu Xiuwen and his people, curiosity filled his eyes. That lady is young and impetuous. She may be on the losing end, sighed someone from the Lu Yun family clan upon witnessing the sight. Why? Asked Yun Shu. It is still unknown who will be able to enter the sect amongst all the people here today. It is still all right if that young girl enters, as the formidable Heavens Royals will not dare to do anything to sect disciples. However, if she doesn't pass the assessment and isn't from a renowned family clan, how will she be able to fight the royal family? The person continued. The formidable Heavens Royals are not magnanimous people. What that fifth prince, Lu Xiuwen, said just now was merely to scare others since he has a powerful identity. The people from Lu Yun family clan disliked the royal family's arrogance. Yun Shu frowned slightly. On the other side, Lu Xiuwen's face darkened, and a cold sneer formed on his lips as he eyed Yi Qingtang. How do I address you? With that said, every onlooker knew that Lu Xiuwen was going to record Yi Qingtang's name down. Yi Qingtang took a look at Lu Xiuwen unhurriedly and said, Lin Town, Yi Qingtang? Without any hesitation, Yi Qingtang directly reported her name and place of origin. Lu Xiuwen scoffed. Yi Qingtang, is it? They'll remember it. Yi Qingtang laughed. You better remember it clearly. She would let this name become Lu Xiuwen's nightmare ultimately. Lu Xiuwen narrowed his eyes slightly. You better pray that you can pass this assessment, otherwise. Lu Xiuwen did not finish his sentence, but everyone knew what was it going to be. Quite a number of people secretly sighed for Yi Qingtang. The sect assessment was not easy, and innumerable people were rejected by sects every year. Now that Lu Xiaowen had asked Yi Qingtang for her name, he would probably not let her off easily in the future. Taking another look at Yi Qingtang, Lu Xiaowen turned around and led his group of lackeys away without forgetting to tell someone beside him, "Tell royal brother to investigate this Yi Qingtang." Yes. Yi Qingtang is still too young. After looking on the scene, people from the Lu Yun family clan even more so felt that Yi Qingtang should not have revealed her identity. However, Yun Shu laughed. Maybe it's because she is confident that she'll pass the assessment? Is a sect assessment that easy though? There's no certainty to pass even if it's you, much less that girl. Yun Shu laughed without saying anything more, though he paid slight attention to Qingtang instinctively. Time passed with every minute and second. At the summit, a bright light from within the cloud layers suddenly shone down. The gold light gathered to form an imaginary path which connected the summit to the clouds. The path to heaven. Everyone seemed to stop breathing the moment they saw the gold light. To enter the sect, they needed to step on the path to heaven. Almost at the same time, all the highly skilled candidates fixed their eyes on the light before them in silent concentration. Go ahead. The Lu Yun family clan people patted Yun Shu's shoulders. Giving a nod, Yun Shu immediately headed towards the path to heaven. The candidates standing at the summit went forward as well. What laid before their eyes was merely a holy beam of light and not a single step. Everyone was confused how exactly to stably walk on the legendary path to heaven. Walk on the path to heaven and enter a sect. This was a sentence everyone knew. However, with the path to heaven right before their eyes, little did they know what to do. The path to heaven was laid only for people in a sect. If one could not even walk on the path stably, it would not be possible for them to enter a sect. It was the simplest step, but also the beginning of a sect assessment. No one dared to go forward, as they were deeply afraid that they would miss such a rare chance due to a small mistake. However, where could they step on in this beam of light? Everyone did not dare to step forward and instead fell into a dead silence at that moment. However, a thin figure stepped out from the silent crowd and walked to under the holy light. Yi Qingtang stood at the starting point of the path to heaven with an unusually calm heart as she looked at the light that connected to the skyline. Xianling sect, she was back again. In the next instant, Yi Qingtang raised her feet gently with a calm expression. When her toes stepped into the light, a gold halo formed into a golden lotus under her feet, supporting the feet when it landed. A lotus with every step? Shock filled everyone's eyes as they looked at the translucent golden lotus that was about the size of a palm under Yi Qingtang's feet. However, Yi Qingtang did not pay attention to those people and only quietly walked up the path to heaven that she could not be more familiar with. Everyone was taken aback on the side as they looked at Yi Qingtang walk into the holy light as if she was walking on flat ground. Wherever she raised her leg, a lotus flower would bloom. The lotuses, which were higher level by level, were like steps laid out one by one, appearing when Yi Qingtang's foot was going to land and disappearing without a trace when she stepped off. Looking from afar, it was as if Yi Qingtang was floating in midair as she stepped on the golden lotuses with holy light showering on her. Such a miraculous scene stunned many candidates, and even those who accompanied the candidates there with no good impressions of Yi Qingtang were surprised by Yi Qingtang's collectedness. She was so calm and collected as though she was walking this path for the umpteenth time. In the blink of an eye, Yi Qingtang was already 10 meters away from the ground. Everyone returned to their senses from the surprise and immediately got moving. Those who were previously afraid to step forward rushed up instantly, imitated Yi Qingtang, and walked up in the holy light. When the first lotus formed under their feet, many hearts fluttered, and they instinctively raised another leg to continue walking up. However, thump. The person who was the most anxious stepped on air as the lotus under his feet disappeared, falling right on the floor. What happened? A look of confusion was seen on the person who fell. He clearly saw the lotus forming under his feet. Why, then, did it disappear when he stepped down? All the subsequent people who went forward could not proceed a step further and fell down after at most 2 or 3 steps. They did not manage to walk up the path to heaven and fell to become a muddy mess instead. Everyone felt gloomy instantly. Why could Yi Qingtang walk up the path to heaven so easily, but they're so battered up? Yun Shu did not rush to go forward. Only after observing for a moment, he took a few deep breaths, calmed his heart, and stepped onto the path to heaven. A lotus bloomed under his foot. Although it was slightly unstable, it became stable very quickly. Yun Shu finally became the second person who walked up the path to heaven, though his speed was much slower than Yi Qingtang's. Every step he took was with extreme caution. Lu Ziyuan's face turned ugly. He tried to step on the path to heaven earlier on and almost fell as well. Dissatisfaction flashed in his eyes as he saw that Yi Qingtang had already walked into the cloud mist. Young Master Yun, how is one able to walk on the path to heaven? Lu Xiuan took a deep breath and suddenly asked Yun Shu. It was absolutely impossible for him to ask Yi Qingtang. Yun Shu flashed a faint smile as he turned around kindly and replied, "A heart like still water, with calmness and patience." Yun Shu's words surprised Lu Xiuan. Calmness and patience? A heart like still water? Lu Xiuan took another look at the path to heaven and stepped on it after making slight adjustments. This time, he put down all the restlessness in his heart, and the lotus under his feet never disappeared. With a calm mind, Lu Xiuan immediately chased up. While Yi Qingtang's speed was faster than everyone else, she still heard the conversation between Lu Xiuan and Yun Shu previously. She paused for a while and looked at Lu Xiuan, who was already walking up the path to heaven under Yun Shu's directions, and a faint smile played on her lips. Senior brother Yun was still so kind-hearted as in her previous life. The path to heaven was the first segment of the sect assessment, and only people with a heart as calm as still water would be able to have a lotus with every step and step on the clouds. Any distracted person would definitely fall. Moreover, the path to heaven was extremely long, and one would still fall if they were slightly doubtful halfway through. In the previous years, many fell from a great height and died while walking on the path to heaven. Yi Qingtang knew that with Yun Shu's character, he would definitely be able to guess the secret behind the path. Rather, it was Lu Xiuan who got a bargain. She did not mind to let Lu Xiuan fall a few more times. After stopping for a while, Yi Qingtang continued heading forward. With Yun Shu's directions, many started to adjust their mentality, and the people on the path to heaven increased gradually. Nonetheless, there were also overly anxious people who could not step on it no matter how. This was an assessment. Filter good-for-nothings away, and only those who remained had the qualifications to proceed. Even if you came from a prestigious family, it was merely a fleeting cloud before sections. Candidates were already on the path to heaven, and most of the people who accompanied the candidates were aware that those who could not step on the path were either too weak in the mind or trying to fake their way through. The path to heaven was only opened for qualified candidates. Every candidate would have on them an item such as a letter or accessory from the powerful person who recommended them. Those items were stained with the powerful person's aura, and only with the presence of the aura would one be qualified to step on the path to heaven. Otherwise, no matter how badly they fell, they would still not be able to enter. "I made a misjudgment," someone from the Lu Yun family clan muttered suddenly while looking at the increasing number of people on the path to heaven. "I didn't think that Yi Qingtang would capable enough to become the first person walking up the path to heaven. Yun Shu even benefited from her. I've never heard of the Yi family clan from Lin Town. If her spirit root is alright, perhaps she will be able to become something," said a sharp-eyed person as he saw Yi Qingtang's specialness. The path to heaven was way too easy for her, and this was unexpected for others. One had to be careful with every step they took on the path to heaven. The higher they walked up, the calmer their emotions should be. Being more than 100 meters away from the ground, one would definitely die if they fell. Everyone was on alert, and many were already soaked in sweat before they even got far. Only Yi Qingtang was walking leisurely as though she was singing and dancing merrily. From time to time, she looked at the birds that were flying past nearby her. Her cheerful and contented posture earned the exasperation of the candidates behind as they gritted their teeth. Who knew where that little girl was from to walk up the path to heaven so leisurely as though she was strolling in her own courtyard? After some time, Yi Qingtang finally reached the end of the path to heaven. At the top of the clouds shone a radiant light. A magnificent palace stood on the clouds. It had open pavilions and terraces and was shaded by surrounding trees. Facing against the sun, it was as though the holy light was shining from behind the sect. If one did not witness it personally, they would be unable to imagine that the sect was actually positioned on top of the cloud layers. No wonder ordinary people never knew where the sects were at. One could know how scary the powerful people within the sect were to be able to build a sect on the clouds and bear thousands of disciples in it. At the end of the path to heaven was Xianling sect's main entrance, where its gates, that were several meters high, were carved with huge dragons. Outside the gate, a middle-aged man in a light blue long gown stood in front of the door with a few Xianling sect disciples behind him. Yi Qingtang finished ascending the path to heaven and stepped on the clouds, which seemed soft but were in fact extremely steady. The middle-aged man looked up and took a look at Yi Qingtang's face as surprise filled him. The path to heaven was difficult to walk on, especially for people who stepped on it for the first time. There was nothing below their feet, and looking around, one would see that they were several hundred meters high in the sky. Just the scenery was enough to send those with an immature mind into a flurry. However, he observed from outside the sect door just now that this young girl was in the lead. Her steps were steady, and she had a casual demeanor. There was neither a trace of fluster nor nervousness. Just this first impression satisfied the middle-aged man. The disciple behind him walked forward, and before saying anything, Yi Qingtang consciously handed Mu Su's letter over. The middle-aged man took another look at Yi Qingtang and gave her a slight nod after receiving the letter, signaling for Yi Qingtang to stand aside. Yi Qingtang was fast. A large group of people behind were still struggling in difficulty. A long time later, Yun Shu was the second person who finally reached the end. While he had a calm and steady nature, he still walked this path very cautiously without daring to increase his speed. Along with Yun Shu's arrival, Lu Xiuwen and other candidates ascended the path to heaven successively. While more than 100 of candidates came, Yi Qingtang estimated that only about 100 people managed to ascend the path to heaven. There were at least dozens of people filtered out by the path to heaven. These dozens of people no longer had the chance to enter a sect. After looking at the color of the sky, the middle-aged man standing outside the sect gate waved his hand gently, and the holy light sprinkled on the clouds vanished instantly. Subsequently, the path to heaven which led the way to the sect disappeared without a trace. The struggling people who were still halfway through were sent back to the ground by golden lotuses. Cries, screams, and begging filled the air immediately. The path to the sect was now an extravagant wish. Yi Qingtang did not have much reaction to it, as she had seen such scenes too many times. "Many thanks." A voice rang beside Yi Qingtang suddenly. She looked over in confusion only to see Yun Shu, whose cheeks were slightly dotted with sweat, standing beside her since God knows when. "Why are you thanking me?" Yi Qingtang raised her brows as she looked at her old friend from her previous life. Yun Shu chuckled. "If Miss Yi didn't take the first step just now, I would not have been able to understand the secret behind the path to heaven." Moreover, Yun Shu purposely fixed his eyes on Yi Qingtang along the way in order to keep his mind at peace. Without looking at the scenery below his feet, his heart was naturally calmer. For the people behind, it was indeed easier if someone took the lead. However, no one had ever said anything about it before the assessment. After all, they were all rivals on the land of the sect. Yi Qingtang looked at Yun Shu with a seeming smile. When will this senior brother Yun finally be able to get rid of his habit of being a mighty nice person? Chapter 99. However, Yun Shu always had the same personality. This was the reason why he took care of Yi Qingtang in her previous life even though she had almost no endowment. Yi Qingtang could not help but laugh when she thought about her previous life. However, when she remembered Yun Shu's destiny in her previous life, her eyes suddenly appeared to be fierce. Senior brother Yun saved her once in the previous life. This time, she would ensure that he had nothing to worry about in his entire life. Yun Shu did not know what Yi Qingtang was thinking about. He thanked her wholeheartedly. However, a pair of fierce and evil eyes scanned Yi Qingtang and Yun Shu. Lu Xiuwen squinted his eyes. He had a decent endowment. The only person he could treat as an opponent in this assessment was Yun Shu, born in the Lu Yun family clan. However, he did not expect that Yun Shu would be so gentle towards Yi Qingtang. Candidates who finished the path to heaven were waiting for further assessment. They were not aware that their behaviors were observed by the faction elders from the shiny pearl on the sect door. What do you think of the candidates this year? Anyone suitable? One of the faction elders was observing through the water moon mirror and asked the rest of the elders. Not many stand out this year. But I think Yun Shu from the Lu Yun family and Lu Xiuwen from the formidable Heavens dynasty are not too bad. They should be able to pass the assessment. One of the elder touched his beard and said, both Yun Shu and Lu Xiuwen have a good background and endowment. As the elder of the sword faction, Elder Lin, you have a sharp sight. Candidates who pass the assessment could enter Xianling sect and become outer sect disciples. After training, they then had the opportunity to enter the inner sect. Within Xianling sect, there were the sword faction, herbal faction, array faction, and fist faction. Among the 4 factions, the sword faction was the strongest. Xianling sect was famous for its sword sect. Elder Lin was the person in charge of the sword faction. He stood at quite a high position among the elders. Besides Elder Lin, the rest of the elders of other factions also focused on Lu Xiuwen and Yun Shu. While everyone fixed their eyesights on the 2 people, one small-figured elder with an extremely sharp sight noticed the girl who was chatting with Yun Shu through the water moon mirror. All of you think highly of Yun Shu and Lu Xiuwen, but I feel this girl is quite interesting. The elder smiled and said. The rest of the elders turned and stared at him. I think the girl was recommended by Mu Su. She is called Yi Qingtang with no special background. No one has heard of this name as well. The elder of the herbal faction said, Yi Qingtang? Is she from the Yi family of Lin Town? The elder of the fist faction raised his eyebrows slightly and said, the Yi family of Lin Town was not famous in the past. However, there was a genius with a green spirit root who became the disciple of Yunshao sect. I think Yi Qingtang is from the same family. However, it would be impossible for Yi Qingtang to stand out when there is Yi Yu. Elder Lin took a glance and showed no more interest. It was a miracle for a not-so-famous family clan to have a genius. It would be impossible to have 2. Things are not predictable. I like this girl a lot. Just now on the path to heaven, she was much more stable than the 2 people from the Lu Yun family and the formidable Heavens dynasty. The elder who had a special preference for Yi Qingtang did not bother with what the rest said. The path to heaven only focuses on one state of mind and not their endowment. Even though the array faction that you are in charge of does not have high requirements for spirit root, you should not be so confident of that now, Elder Qin. Elder Lin glanced at the elder. We shall wait to see her spirit root then, the elder of the herbal faction suggested. Chapter 100. The first step of the sect assessment was to assess the candidates' spirit roots. Red ones were inferior grade, orange and yellow ones were medium grade, and green ones were superior grade. If one possessed a bluish-green spirit root, they would be able to skip the outer sect and become an inner sect disciple immediately. As for blue and purple spirit roots, no one had seen one for over 1,000 years. None of the sect were still hoping for that. The way Xianling sect assessed spirit roots was rather special. It did not require candidates to show their spirit root. Instead, they would place their hands on a human-sized spirit stone and direct their strength using their spirit root. The spirit stone would change into the same color as their spirit root. The order people were tested was based on the sequence in which people finished the path to heaven, starting from the last. The first candidate stepped forward and placed his hand on the spirit stone. Soon, the ivory stone turned yellow in color. Yellow spirit root. Next, a middle-aged man who was in charge of the assessment said. That candidate was quite delighted. His yellow spirit root was inferior to a green spirit root, but he was qualified to enter the sect at least. Candidates who followed up all showed yellow or orange colors. At last, Lu Xiuwen stepped forward. Everyone focused on him, and even the middle-aged man who was bored with orange and yellow colors also showed some interest. Lu Xiuwen walked towards the giant spirit stone and placed his hand on the stone. At that instant, a spark of green appeared and covered the entire spirit stone within a second. Green spirit root, not bad? The middle-aged man looked at Lu Xiaowen in contentment. Green spirit root was quite rare. Disciples with green spirit roots could all enter the inner sect after training in the outer sect. Lu Xiaowen was expected to be an inner sect disciple with his green spirit root. Lu Xiaowen smiled gently. He lifted up his chin slightly and stepped back when everyone looked at him with admiration. I think Lu Xiaowen definitely can pass the assessment since he is from the formidable Heavens dynasty. I agree. He stands out with that green spirit root. Even if the other assessments are not up to expectation, his spirit root will grant him into the sect. Candidates who had their spirit roots assessed could not help but envy him. There were many sect assessments. One would fail if they made any mistake. However, a green spirit root would serve as insurance to cover for any possible mistakes in other assessments. One would need to pass all assessments successfully if their spirit roots were not superior. For example, they would say goodbye to the sect if they made any mistake in any assessment with their orange or yellow spirit roots. Yun Shu was the next person after Lu Xiaowen. Yun Shu was not arrogant like Lu Xiaowen. He smiled gently and nodded towards the middle-aged man with respect. He then placed his hand on the spirit stone. Another round of applause was heard when the green color appeared. Green spirit root. The middle-aged man was in a very good mood now. It made the assessment this year more interesting when 2 green spirit roots appeared. The better the quality of one's spirit root, the faster the speed of cultivation. Their strength would be purer as well. The quality of spirit root served as the foundation for a person. One could achieve higher levels with a better spirit root. Yun Shu stepped back humbly and looked towards Yi Qingtang instinctively. Yi Qingtang's spirit root was the only one left to assess among all candidates. Everyone was staring at Yi Qingtang now. No one forgot how easily Yi Qingtang achieved the first place on the path to heaven, and she was ahead of everyone. Lu Xiaowen also gazed at Yi Qingtang. His sight was less calm but more doubtful. Yi Qingtang had gained an advantage through the path to heaven. If her spirit root was of good quality, she would be another popular candidate whom he had to fight with to enter the sect. Chapter 101. 101 Lu Xiaowen's target was not just to enter the Shenling sect but also to be the top person. As such, he would catch the elders' attention. He would not allow anyone to mess up his plan. Within the sect, the 4 elders also focused on Yi Qingtang. She performed too well on the path to heaven, and she definitely caught their attention. Especially, Elder Qin of the Array faction stared closely without blinking once. Yi Qingtang walked towards the spirit stone under everyone's gaze. She slowly raised her hand and tried to adjust her spirit root. Continuous strands of aura slowly diffused into the spirit stone through her palm. The ivory stone then started changing color. Instantly, the stone was covered by red color. Just that there was a glimpse of orange in that red color. When the color stabilized, the whole place was silent. The middle-aged man who had great hope was also stunned. Based on Yi Qingtang's behaviors on the path to heaven just now, he was expecting at least a yellow or green spirit root, maybe even better. He could not imagine that Yi Qingtang would possess the most inferior red spirit root. Anyone could have a red spirit root. It could be found everywhere. Even though her spirit root also showed a slight orange color, but it was not up to the level of an orange spirit root. It was still regarded as a red spirit root. Everyone was astonished at that moment. No one expected that Yi Qingtang possessed such a low-quality spirit root. Lu Xiaowen, who was holding his breath, felt relieved. The concern in his eyes was immediately replaced with sarcasm when he saw the red color. He thought that Yi Qingtang possessed superior spirit root and that was why she dared to challenge him previously. However, he did not think that it was just a red spirit root. Yun Shu was also stunned slightly, as he did not expect the outcome. The 4 elders in the sect showed different expressions when they saw the red color. The elders of the Herbal faction and Fist faction did not bother so much, but Elder Lin of the Sword faction showed despise on his face. He tilted his head and looked towards Elder Qin, who was taken aback. Elder Qin, I think this time you got the wrong person. Elder Qin felt a bit embarrassed as he did not expect such an outcome. Among the 4 factions, his array faction had the lowest requirements towards spirit root. However, a red spirit root was still way below the requirement. Mu Su had never recommended anyone to the Xianling sect. I thought that she would be a genius since he broke his rules. Who knew? Such a joke. Elder Lin sneered. Red spirit roots were never seen in the sect. Even the outer sect disciples started with orange spirit roots. No one with a red spirit root had ever entered the sect. Elder Qin was made speechless by Elder Lin's words. When everyone was mocking or sighing at Yi Qingtang, she still remained calm. Staring at the spirit stone, her eyes were immersed with an undetectable smile. Her spirit root just leveled up. Initially, her spirit root was just a pure red spirit root. However, after nourishing it with the floating pagoda for a month, her spirit root was about to level up to an orange one. That faint orange color, ignored by the rest, provided Yi Qingtang with great hope. She would need at most 1 more month to nourish it into an orange spirit root. Afterward, she could reach the yellow spirit root. Even the blue spirit root that appeared for a split second before was not totally impossible now. However, her spirit root would require more nourishment to level up further. The requirement would multiply as it leveled up slowly. If Yi Qingtang really wished to nourish a blue spirit root, that would be a long way to go, and she was not in a rush. Under the sarcastic gaze by the audience, Yi Qingtang put down her hand and stepped back. The middle-aged man stared at Yi Qingtang in a complex way. He was silent for a while, and then asked people to register Yi Qingtang's spirit root level on the booklet. He previously thought that this lady was full of potential, but he did not expect that her spirit root would be one of such low quality. It would be almost impossible to enter the sect with such a spirit root. Whether she would be allowed to enter the sect by the elders was now fully dependent on her performance in the following assessments. Such a pity. To this point, all candidates' spirit root levels were recorded, and the real assessment was just about to begin. Everyone sighed in relief when they witnessed Yi Qingtang's spirit root. They would not want to see another strong competitor when Yun Shu and Lu Xiuwen were already present. Spirit root is not that important. There will be more assessments. Yun Shu was the only one who talked to Yi Qingtang. He spoke to her slowly and gently. It seemed that he was trying to comfort her. Yi Qingtang smiled slightly. She could clearly notice senior brother Yun's worry from his reaction. It was funny for her, but at the same time, she felt the warmth from his concern. Yun Shu finally felt relieved after seeing her smile. We should both strive hard to enter the sect, Yun Shu said. Yi Qingtang nodded. Brother Yun, you are always so gentle to all kinds of people. Yun Shu and Yi Qingtang heard an unpleasant voice. Yi Qingtang raised her eyes and saw Lu Xiuwen sneering at her sarcastically. Lu Xiuwen took a glimpse at Yi Qingtang and spoke to Yun Shu. Everyone knows about Lu Yun family's fame. I'm not surprised by Brother Yun's kindness. But you should know what kind of person to befriend. Do not downgrade yourself with your kindness. Yun Shu frowned as he disliked Lu Ziyuan's attitude. I know what I am doing, Brother Lu, Yun Shu said. Lu Xiuwen did not take it seriously. He turned to look at Yi Qingtang and said, Yi Qingding, how dare you to come for the sect assessment with this kind of spirit root? If even you can enter the sect, wouldn't the rest of us be useless? Lu Xiuwen did not bother to hide his hostility towards Yi Qingtang. He was very certain that she had no way to enter the sect. He would not let her go easily. Yun Shu's face clouded and wanted to speak up for Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang suddenly stepped forward and struck back at Lu Xiuwen before Yun Shu could. Lu Xiuwen, remember what you just said? She would soon let him understand who was really useless. I will definitely remember that. Lu Xiuwen smiled coldly. The real assessment began after the spirit root test. Based on the inverted order which people completed the path to heaven, Yi Qingtang would be the last person to go. The middle-aged man who was in charge of the assessment led everyone to a place outside the courtyard. The courtyard was peculiar as it was built on top of cloud layers. Multiple 8 trigrams flags served as walls that surrounded the courtyard. The flags were 4 meters in height and stuck closely together. The view inside was totally covered up. The middle-aged man placed his hands back and stared at the candidates. All candidates then stopped chatting and remained silent. This is an illusion array. All candidates are required to enter the array one by one. Illusion array? Various discussions arose among the candidates after the middle-aged man's words. No one knew what this illusion array was, but they were all clear that as a sect assessment, it would not be easy to pass. Senior, do we need to break the array in order to pass the assessment? One of the candidates asked, and that was what the rest were curious of. The middle-aged man shook his head. It would be best if you can break the array. If you can't, we shall see the situation in the array. Do not need to break the array? Everyone became even more curious about the illusion array in front of them. The middle-aged man asked a disciple behind him to distribute wax balls to candidates. There will be combat inside the array. Nothing inside will threaten your life. If you cannot take it anymore, just crush the wax ball, and the illusion array will disperse. You can then leave the array. However, I have to warn you now. The moment you crush the wax ball, the assessment comes to an end. The timing you crush the wax ball and the length of time you can stay in the array will be taken into consideration for the assessment. He said, Combat? The key information in the middle-aged man's words was clearly captured by the candidates. Though he mentioned combat, their life would not be threatened. Furthermore, it was mentioned earlier that they did not need to break the array. It seemed like this assessment was just to test how long they could last in the array. Everyone was not that nervous after figuring out the rules. Even if they could not break the array, they just needed to spend more time in the array. It would not be very difficult. Based on the inverted order which people completed the path to heaven, a young man would be the first person to enter the illusion array. The young man was around 18 to 19 years old. He was tall and possessed an orange spirit root. He did not perform very well on the path to heaven, so he was well prepared now to earn some attention in the array. Are you ready to enter the array? The middle-aged man looked at the excited young man and asked in a deep voice. The young man nodded without any hesitation. The middle-aged man raised his hand, and a path emerged from the closely arranged 8 trigrams flags. The path was covered entirely by fog, and no one could see the view inside clearly. Enter. A command was given. The young man then walked towards the illusion array. His giant body disappeared from view after he stepped into the fog. The 8 trigrams flags assembled back and enclosed the entire array. I think that young man will be inside for quite a while. The longer you stay inside, the better it is. Even if you can't break the array, you can also drag out time inside. One of the candidates murmured, That's true. I'll take at least 2 to 3 days to assess the hundreds of us. Yi Qingtang stood at a corner and scanned through the rest of the candidates. She smiled slightly when she noticed how the rest felt relieved towards the illusion array. When was it ever easy to pass a sect assessment? Just when everyone thought that they would have to wait for at least half a day, a formidable roar came out of the illusion array all of a sudden. The roar seemed to make the cloud layers below them to tremble. Ah! A horrifying scream was heard along the roar of the beast. The piercing scream seemed to be able to tear people apart. The two sounds hit everyone like a flash of lightning. Previously relaxed people were now all covered with goosebumps. What was that? What is in the illusion array? The roaring sound of the beast greeted their ears constantly. It totally destroyed the calmness among everyone. Such a deep roar had to be made from an extraordinary demonic beast. Was there a powerful demonic beast holding down the illusion array? Suddenly, everyone's good moods disappeared. A stream of blue fog slowly drifted out of the illusion array the next second. A path emerged from the 8 trigrams flags instantly, and a man fled out in panic from the array. The young man who just entered the array a few moments ago was now pale and sweating heavily. The calmness he had before entering the array was long gone, and only a few scratch marks were left on his face now. No one knew what he had just encountered in the array. However, his reaction just now really shocked everyone who was present. Though this young man possessed an orange spirit root, he should not be so weak. He only stayed in the array for a few moments before coming out. Next. The middle-aged man took a quick glance at the young man and commanded. The second candidate shivered. He was totally taken aback by the previous candidate's reaction. However, he had no choice but to step into the array. Everyone was having some deep thoughts after the second candidate entered the array. They looked towards the first candidate subconsciously. The young man was still panicking and upset. Everyone knew what the situation was now, and no one asked him what he encountered in the array. The rules of the sect assessment did not allow candidates to reveal such information. Furthermore, as a result of the competition happening between the candidate would not give them any answer even if they asked. This time, the candidate who entered the array did not escape immediately. However, the roaring sound of the beast rose one after another. Soon, a streak of blue fog was seen, and this represented the end of the second candidate's assessment. Even though he lasted slightly longer than the first candidate, the duration was still alarmingly short. Based on this speed, they would need only less than half a day to assess the hundreds of candidates here. The next few candidates who entered the array all did not last very long. All of them came out with pale faces as if they had seen something terrifying. The candidates who were still waiting were close to breaking down. They thought that as long as they lasted long enough in the array, they could pass the assessment. Who knew that things were much more complicated than what they imagined? More than half of the candidates had finished the assessment in less than half a day. Lu Xiaowen would be the next one now. He took a deep breath and stood in front of the array. He squinted his eyes as the array slowly opened up a path. Eventually, he walked in. Among the clouds and fog, Lu Xiaowen did not have a clear view in front of him. He took a few steps forward, and the fog suddenly dispersed. He saw himself standing in a forest, and a pair of red eyes were staring at him through the gaps of the branches. At the next second, a giant beast walked out of the forest. It was a level 5 demonic beast with a height of 5 meters. Its body was full black in color, and its tusks were shimmering under the light. Its deathly red eyes stared at Lu Xiaowen, the only living creature in front of the beast. Lu Xiaowen panicked when he saw the demonic beast. A level 5 demonic beast was not something that the candidates could handle as they had not gone through any training. What's wrong? How can a sect assessment be so difficult? Lu Xiaowen frowned. He did not even wish to beat the beast. He would celebrate in joy if he could escape from it. When Lu Xiaowen was contemplating, the beast roared in rage. Its giant body flew towards him. Lu Xiaowen held the wax ball tighter, but then he remembered what the middle-aged man told them. Nothing inside would threaten your life. A thought came through his mind, and he gave up the opportunity of crushing the wax ball. He immediately pulled out the sword by his waist and blocked the beast's attack. He could feel a heavy weight from the sword, but such strength was totally incomparable with that from a real level 5 demonic beast. Lu Xiaowen's eyes sparkled, and he dashed forward with his sword. As time passed, Lu Xiaowen spent a much longer time in the array than all previous candidates. The middle-aged man's face softened. Though there were some candidates who lasted inside for quite a while, Lu Xiaowen was in a much better state compared to them. A streak of blue fog emerged after a long time. Lu Xiaowen appeared outside the array the next second. His face was not pale but still not very pleasant. Though he found out the trick of the array, he could not find a way to break it. He could only crush the wax ball before he ran out of energy. However, Lu Xiaowen took a breath and looked towards Yun Shu. He believed that the duration he spent inside the array was much longer than all previous candidates. Now, there were only Yi Qingtang and Yun Shu left. Lu Xiaowen did not bother with Yi Qingtang, who only possessed a red spirit root. Only Yun Shu could compete with him at this assessment. Lu Xiaowen, you can now go to the next assessment location. The middle-aged man spoke to him slowly. He was quite satisfied with Lu Xiaowen's performance. Lu Xiaowen spent quite a long time in the array, so all previous candidates had already moved on to the next assessment location. Lu Xiaowen nodded slightly. His arrogant sight swept past Yun Shu and landed on Yi Qingtang. He smiled and left. Next, the middle-aged man said. Yun Shu took a glance at Yi Qingtang. He nodded and walked into the array. Outside the array, Yi Qingtang was the only person left. A faintly discernible smile emerged on her face. She clearly witnessed the sight from Lu Xiaowen before he left. Lu Xiaowen was quite talented since he could last so long in the array. However, so what? Yi Qingtang chuckled. She waited patiently for her turn to enter the array. Yun Shu spent a long time inside. He could only crush the wax ball to leave the array. When he stepped out of the array, he looked towards Yi Qingtang's direction instinctively. He was about to remind her about something when the middle-aged man stopped his words. Yun Shu, you can now move on to the next assessment location. Yes. Yun Shu wanted to tell Yi Qingtang about the illusion array. However, he did not have any chance to do so and had to leave for the next assessment. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Qingtang with a complicated expression. Yi Qingtang, are you ready to enter now? Yi Qingtang took a step forward and nodded. The illusion array was turned on. Within the sect, the 4 sect elders were staring at the image from the water-moon mirror. All of them did not pay much attention as Yi Qingtang walked inside the array. Yun Shu and Lu Xiuwen did quite well in the array. They could figure out the trick within such a short period of time. Elder Lin was quite satisfied with both of their performances. Su Wan and Mo, you were not too bad as well. I saw that they lasted inside for quite a long time. Though it's not comparable with Yun Shu and Lu Xiuwen, they are still up to the standard. The elder of the Fist faction also noticed some potential candidates. Illusion array is now ended then. Elder Lin spoke softly and ignored Yi Qingtang, who just entered the array. Elder Qin frowned. Elder Lin sneered at Elder Qin's reaction. Elder Qin, are you still thinking of that Yi Qingtang? She has only a red spirit root. The disciples previously could not last very long in the array. I'm afraid she will also. The moment when Elder Lin spoke, the 4 elders were shocked by the scene from the water-moon mirror. Yi Qingtang witnessed the illusions appearing in front of her, but she was unusually calm. She stared calmly at the level 5 demonic beast and did not step back at all. Suddenly, she pulled out her sword and pushed herself above the ground, dashing towards the beast. The sharp point of the blade pierced through the heart of the demonic beast. Without any extra moves, the demonic beast collapsed as its heart was pierced through. Its giant body turned into a ball of black fume and disappeared in front of her. The 4 elders were astonished at the moment. All demonic creatures inside the array were made from illusions. Though they possessed the appearances of level 5 demonic beasts, their actual strength was less than 10% of the actual ones. They were almost like normal beasts. However, all candidates were not aware of this and no one revealed about that as well. The fierce look of the level 5 demonic beast was enough to frighten the young men. Some of the previous candidates noticed the weakened beast. However, under the constant attack of the beast, its giant body, and cruel appearance, all these created huge pressure on the candidates. It was not easy to suppress the pressure. But for Ying, she did not even blink before she killed the demonic beast made from illusion with one single move. This was really beyond the 4 elders' imaginations. After Yi Qingtang killed one beast, she noticed another 2 beasts made from the illusion. Her mouth tilted. The demonic beast would appear constantly inside the illusion array. Only breaking the array could end this totally. Even if one could kill 1,000 of them, they would be trapped here forever. This time, Yi Qingtang did not attack the 2 beasts. Instead, she turned and rushed towards the opposite direction in the forest. That's it. In the end, she still cannot control her fear. Elder Lin was no longer shocked. He left a comment as he saw Yi Qingtang escaping from the beasts. However, at the moment when Elder Lin left the comment, all elders were totally stunned by Yi Qingtang's next move. Yi Qingtang's tiny figure dashed across the forest. The trees behind her served as a natural barrier from the 2 demonic beasts. Her sight was sharp, and she scanned through the trees that looked totally alike to each other. Suddenly, her feet tapped softly and flew towards an insignificant tree. She raised her sword and struck towards the top of the tree. A branch was chopped down. The branch fell onto the ground and turned into a streak of fumes. The fumes then disappeared. The 2 beasts that were roaring and chasing behind her suddenly became 2 balls of black fumes and then dispersed. Yi Qingtang landed in confidence and stared at the forest that was slowly disappearing in front of her. A tinge of a smile was seen on her face. Everything in the illusion array was all made from illusions. The only way to break the array was to find out the array center. Breaking the center could then break the array. In her previous life, Yi Qingtang was trapped inside for a long time. She was not willing to give up and struggled with all her strength. She only crushed the wax ball when she used up all her energy. However, in this life, Yi Qingtang lowered her head and stared at the complete wax ball, and a deep smile appeared in her eyes. The illusion array was very difficult for normal candidates. The center of the array was hidden inside the trees that looked exactly the same. Normal people would not be able to distinguish it. However, she had lost count the number of times she entered the illusion arrays when she was in the Xianling sect in her previous life. She could remember everything in the array clearly. The entire forest was now dispersing as layers of fumes. Yi Qingtang witnessed the path that she came from was opened up again. She walked towards the exit slowly. The middle-aged man who guarded outside the array stared at the young lady in shock. The little figure was so eye-catching in the fog. She broke the array. The middle-aged man was totally stunned. The illusion array was the first sect assessment. Only 3 to 5 people managed to do so in the past thousands of years. Those few were extremely talented and were born in array family clans. That was the reason why they could break the array. Those few people spent at least half a day to break the array, and some even spent 1 or 2 days. How much time had passed since Yi Qingtang entered? This amount of time was not even enough for her to see through the views in the array. How could she break the array? The middle-aged man could not figure out an answer, and he remained in surprise. I have broken the array. Can I go to the next assessment location now? Yi Qingtang walked out calmly and looked towards the stunned middle-aged man. Fear came from inside. When one conquered fear, all beasts from the illusion would disappear. The middle-aged man pulled himself out of surprise. He adjusted his emotions and said, "You can now proceed to the next assessment location." Yi Qingtang nodded and left. The middle-aged man stared at her back, and multiple thoughts arose in his head. He found the way Yi Qingtang broke the array peculiar, and instinctively he contacted the elders who witnessed the entire assessment process through the psychic tablet. Only the elders would know what exactly happened in the array. "Elders, Yi Qingtang just now?" The middle-aged man spoke to the psychic tablet. Before he could finish his words, Elder Qin's voice was heard from the psychic tablet. Yi Qingtang broke the array by herself. There was no abnormality to the array. The middle-aged man was stunned and did not question further. However, within the sect, after speaking to the middle-aged man, Elder Qin looked towards Elder Lin, whose face was unpleasant. Chapter 108. Elder Lin, I'm afraid that you are wrong this time. Elder Qin sneered. Elder Lin's face was very unpleasant now. If he had not witnessed the scene with his own eyes, he would never believe that a 15-year-old young lady would be able to break the illusion array once she entered. The center of the illusion array changed each time it was turned on. Only disciples of the Xianling sect would know about the center. Yi Qingtang was just a candidate, and she was not even born into an array family. How could she break the array within such a short time? Elder Lin remembered how he looked down at Yi Qingtang previously and felt slightly embarrassed. It's pure luck. It won't be so easy for the next few assessments. Elder Lin took a deep breath and tried to hide his surprise towards Yi Qingtang. Elder Qin took a glimpse at Elder Lin and decided not to reply to him anymore. He was delighted, but he sighed at the same time. He was the elder of the array faction, and he definitely preferred disciples who were talented in array formation. He was satisfied with her from the beginning. Her shocking performance during the illusion array made him applaud in awe as well. She was really a rare and talented person. However, Elder Qin sighed secretly. He would really want to nurture Yi Qingtang if her spirit root was of a higher quality. Such a pity. No one would know what the 4 elders were thinking about. Yi Qingtang also headed towards the second assessment location after breaking the array. Yi Qingtang arrived at the place soon, as the 2 locations were not far from each other. Yun Shu was waiting for the second assessment to begin when he saw Yi Qingtang coming over. He was a little surprised. Lu Xiuwen, who was standing nearby, saw Yi Qingtang as well. But his eyes were full of sarcasm. Yi Qingtang came over slightly after Yun Shu reached the second assessment location. She definitely only spent a little while in the array. Lu Xiaowen was confident that Yi Qingtang was like the rest of the candidates who were horrified by the monsters in the array. Lu Xiaowen only glanced at her once and decided not to pay attention to her anymore. A red spirit root was too inferior for a candidate. She definitely did not stand a chance to enter the sect since she flunked the first assessment. Lady Yi. Yun Shu greeted her politely. Yi Qingtang took a glimpse at senior brother Yun. He wanted to say something but hesitated. She was amused by his reaction. She was the last candidate for the previous assessment. Only she would know the result of the assessment. It seemed like senior brother Yun thought she escaped from the array in fear, and that was why he showed such a complex expression. Senior brother Yun, I will not be the useless junior sister again anymore. Has the second assessment started? Yi Qingtang smiled and asked. She did not explain much since if she could enter the sect by the end of the assessments, Yun Shu would know her performances in each assessment. It's going to start soon. The second assessment is also testing on array formation, but it's a sword array. Yun Shu said. Sword array? Yi Qingtang lifted her eyebrows and glanced through the stone table that was around 100 miles away. The stone table was engraved with the 8 trigrams, and a sword was placed in the stone, at the center of the 8 trigrams. Senior brother Yun, this is not an array formation, Yi Qingtang smiled. Not an array formation? Yun Shu was confused. Chapter 109. Yi Qingtang used a voice that could only be heard by the two of them and said, Array formation has a center to break, but the sword array does not. This means that it cannot be broken. The sword in the stone is not the center? Yun Shu was not familiar with array formations. That's not true. Yi Qingtang shook her head and smiled. The middle-aged man arrived at the location when Yi Qingtang was chatting with Yun Shu. The sword array will test how long you can last inside. The middle-aged man opened his mouth expressionlessly. It was another simple introduction without any clues given. All candidates were confused by the rules. They were totally lost after the unpredictable illusion array just now. They could not figure out the assessment ways at all. Testing on duration again. This time would there be any demonic beasts? The standard this time is determined by your situation in the sword array. You can't give up by yourself anymore. If you're hurt by the array, your assessment will end. The middle-aged man walked to the side and added, Hurt by the array? The candidates caught the key information. However, when they glanced at the empty 8 trigram stage, they still could not figure out the nature of the assessment. The first candidate felt extremely hopeless, as this round of assessment was conducted in front of everyone. People behind might still be able to refer to the previous candidates, but he was the first one again. First candidate, up the stage now. The middle-aged man did not leave any thinking time for the candidates. He immediately announced the beginning of the assessment. The first candidate came to the front in despair. However, this time the middle-aged man provided him with a reminder. You can use weapons to assist you in the sword array. The candidate immediately held the sword by his waist and stood on the 8 trigrams stage desperately. The middle-aged man then walked to the side of the stage and turned on the sword array. Rays of light suddenly came out of the sword in the stone. The white light covered the entire sword. Suddenly, the stationary sword started to vibrate, and multiple sword shadows emerged out of the sword. The shadows formed 5 lightsabers, dashing towards the air. They turned sharply in the mid-air and attacked the candidate on the 8 trigram stage. The 5 lightsabers shot towards the candidate from all directions. The candidate shivered and then lifted his sword to defend himself. A loud clang rang. The candidates flourished his sword continuously to fend off the attack of the lightsabers. His feet also shifted swiftly for defense. The moment he was hurt by the lightsabers, the assessment would then end. This assessment appeared to be easier than the previous one, and he definitely would put in all his effort to compensate his poor performance previously. The candidates successfully fended off the first attack as the speed of the lightsabers were not too fast. The sword array doesn't seem to be very difficult. The rest of the candidates who were watching the assessment were much more relieved. This was much easier than the illusion array. Yi Qingtang noticed how the rest sighed in relief, and her mouth tilted. Not very difficult? You will soon know how difficult it can be. When everyone was calmer than before, the sword in the stone vibrated again. Another 5 lightsabers flew out all of a sudden. The lightsabers on the stage increased to 10 now, and the speed doubled. The candidate who just sighed in relief was shocked by the 10 lightsabers. Before he could react, the swords dashed towards him with double the speed. Chapter 110. Shadows of the sword shimmered on the 8 trigram stage. The 10 lightsabers flew in the air. Their speed increased so fast that they did not leave any reaction time for the candidate. The candidate's shoulder was cut by one of the light swords before he could adjust his position. The middle-aged man switched off the sword array immediately. The lightsabers on the 8 trigram stage then disappeared, leaving the shocked candidate on the stage alone. The wound on his shoulder was clearly visible. The whole process happened within a split second, which was even shorter than the time he spent in the illusion array. Next, the middle-aged man said. The candidates no longer felt relieved anymore. Previously, they were nervous about the illusion array as they could not see the situation inside. However, though the views inside were terrifying, some who were brave were still able to fight against the demonic beasts. Even if they could not do so, they could still run around in the array to earn some time. But now, there seemed to be a heavy stone pressing down on everyone's hearts. There was totally no time to rest in the sword array. Though the 8 trigram stage's size was at least 100 square meters, where could they run to under the attack of so many lightsabers together? What was more desperate was that even if they could fend off one attack, the number doubled in the next round. The time in between only allowed them to take one breath at most. No one felt relieved anymore. The second candidate had no choice but to step onto the stage. Everyone had a heavy heart now, trying to adjust their state of mind. Lu Xiaowen was calm when he witnessed how the rest reacted. He was quite talented as he went through cultivation with his master at a very young age. He was definitely more skilled than the rest, and he had more confidence towards the sword array. However, Lu Xiaowen's calmness faded slowly as more candidates went through the sword array. The first round was 5 lightsabers, the second was 10, and the third increased to 20. The number doubled each time. Previous candidates only managed to last until the start of the third round at most. Based on this calculation, it would be 40 the next round. How were the candidates supposed to defend that? People were dazzled by the flying lightsabers on the stage. It was difficult to have a clear vision of the positions of the lightsabers. How could they dodge the attacks? This was like fighting against 10 people with one person's strength. The sword array took less time than the illusion array. Candidates who finished the assessment left straight away. Soon, it was Lu Xiaowen's turn. Lu Xiaowen's ability allowed him to push through the third attack with all his strength. Eventually, he was cut by one of the lightsabers during the fourth attack, and his assessment ended. However, he was the best candidate among the rest for now. Yun Shu was the next one after Lu Xiaowen. Yun Shu's results were almost the same as Lu Xiaowen. He struggled for a while more, but eventually he also stopped at the fourth round. Yi Qingtang was the only person left. They'll wait for you at the third assessment location. Be careful. Yun Shu reminded Yi Qingtang and left. The middle-aged man looked towards Yi Qingtang worriedly. If the illusion array was testing on one's wisdom and bravery, the sword array would be testing one's true fighting skills. Lu Xiaowen and Yun Shu both possessed green spirit roots. It was normal for them to be better than the rest. However, Yi Qingtang, ultimately, she only had the worst red spirit root. Chapter 111. Yi Qingtang, are you ready to enter the sword array? The middle-aged man did not limit his words this time. Yi Qingtang nodded slightly. She held her sword and walked towards the 8 trigram stage in silence. The 4 elders stared at Yi Qingtang in the sect. Their expressions were delicate. The elders of the Fist faction and Herbal faction did not have many feelings for the young lady, who had an excellent performance in the illusion array. Elder Qin of the Array faction had some interest in Yi Qingtang. Elder Qin, what do you think about her results this time? Elder Lin suddenly asked. Elder Qin took a glimpse at Elder Lin and said, the sword array is set by your sword faction. You should be clearer than me. Elder Lin sneered and then looked towards the mirror. The sword array tests the fighting skills of a candidate. I have never seen anyone with a red spirit root step onto the 8 trigram stage. I can't predict her performance this time. Though Elder Lin did not make it obvious, everyone could sense his sarcasm. Elder Qin frowned. He did not like the tone that Elder Lin used, but he had to admit that what he said was true. The sword array was different from the illusion array. A person without some practical fighting skills could not last long even if they mastered array formations. Yi Qingtang's spirit root. Elder Qin sighed. Yi Qingtang stood still on the 8 trigram stage. The middle-aged man turned on the sword array as he saw Yi Qingtang was prepared. The sword in the stone was surrounded by light the next second. It vibrated slightly, and lightsabers were split out of the stone. When Yi Qingtang took a deep breath and was ready to fight the lightsabers, the light on the sword in the stone suddenly changed. The white light was replaced by a blood-red color. A loud and piercing sound was made by the sword in the stone the next moment. It vibrated violently, and countless light shadows were seen. The middle-aged man's face turned as he witnessed the changes of the sword in the stone. What happened? Why was there a sudden change to the sword in the stone? An ominous feeling crept within him. Only white light should be radiated when the sword array was turned on. How could the light suddenly turn red? The middle-aged man sensed something was not right. He then wanted to turn off the sword array temporarily, but his hand was rebounded off by a strong force from the button. The piercing sound cut through the sky again. Within a second, the sword in the stone that was surrounded by the right light suddenly released innumerable red lightsabers. The blood-red lightsabers flew into the sky like red rain, covering the whole sky. The entire 8 trigram stage was red due to the reflection of the light. Yi Qingtang felt slightly uneasy as she stared at the bright light above her head in surprise. She went through the sword array in her previous lives assessment. However, she was cut by the lightsabers at the beginning of the second round in her previous life. Yi Qingtang spent a long time in the Xianling sect in her previous life, but she had never heard that the sword in the stone would radiate red light. She could not even imagine the first round of the sword array would have more than 100 of lightsabers. Even Yi Qingtang, who was reborn, was also shocked by the variation of the sword array. However, before she could figure out what exactly happened, the hundreds of lightsabers above her head dashed towards the 8 trigram stage suddenly like raindrops. Chapter 112. This is bad. Within the sect, the 4 faction elders, who were watching the sword array assessment, suddenly stood up upon seeing the blinding red light. Expressions of shock were etched on their faces. What's going on? Why is there a sudden change to the sword array? Elder Qin's expression was the ugliest. A sky full of red light fell on the ground like raindrops with a speed so fast that one was unable to catch. Under an attack of such a level, a young girl would definitely be unable to block them even if she was a born genius. Similarly, Elder Lin had a look of shock. The sword array was the first segment of Xianling sect's entrance assessment and had been in use for hundreds of years without any errors. But then, such an abnormality happened before his eyes. For normal assessments, the sword array had been weakened a lot, and even if candidates were injured, they were merely minor abrasions. The sword array would definitely not take their lives. However, before their eyes, the lightsabers would only turn red when fighting against enemies. The sword array then was no longer the sword array that the candidates had experienced. This was the real absolute kill sword array. As long as one was attacked, one would definitely lose their life. For a moment, Elder Lin's face darkened as well. Even if he did not like how Elder Qin thought so highly of Yi Qingtang, he did not want the sword array to have any abnormality at this instant. The sword faction was responsible for preparing this sword array. Elder Lin, what exactly is going on? Elder Win asked with furrowed brows. Elder Lin's expression was very ugly. Without explaining further to Elder Qin, he directly reached for the psychic tablet and ordered the middle-aged man beside the 8 trigram stage. Turn the sword array off immediately. If they were any later, Yi Qingtang might lose her life on the 8 trigram stage. Upon receiving the news, the middle-aged man beside the 8 trigram stage was very anxious. He tried to shut the sword array down again but was repelled away by the force once again. Elder Lin, this sword array cannot be turned off, the middle-aged man said hurriedly. Elder Lin's face darkened further. The sword array cannot be turned off? How could it be? Just when everyone was surprised over the sudden change in the sword array, Yi Qingtang, who was standing on the 8-trigram stage, faced her first crisis since her rebirth. Lightsabers pierced down one after another at a speed as fast as lightning. Yi Qingtang sensed a strong, overbearing force flowing out continuously from the sword in the stone. She could not care about any other thing and could only lift her sword in the shortest time possible. With a quick flick of her wrist, she made a series of strokes and drew a circle with her sword. Spinning around quickly, it was as though that flash of sword became a silver shield, reflecting away all the lightsabers that were flying down towards her. Suddenly, a loud clang rang. The descending lightsabers clashed against those that were hit away, turning the sky above the 8-trigram stage into a sea of red. The clashing sound was as loud as the sound of the explosion of a massive rock. Yi Qingtang backstepped quickly with clever footsteps which were rapid yet orderly, fast, and steady. Accompanying with the dancing sword in her hands, she actually blocked the shower of lightsabers. All of this fell into the eyes of the 4 faction elders. Originally shocked over the sudden change in the sword array, they were completely stunned after witnessing Yi Qingtang's actions. This girl actually blocked them? Elder Qin's eyes widened suddenly, completely in disbelief over what he saw. The absolute kill sword array could defeat millions of enemies. How could it be blocked by a candidate who has not even entered the sect? Chapter 113. Even Elder Lin's eyes were full of shock. As an elder from the sword faction, no one other than him knew more clearly of the force of the sword array. Although the sword array was only at the starting stage, it was already extremely fierce. He initially thought that Yi Qingtang would lose her life in the first wave of attacks, however. Things were completely beyond his expectations. That is, the 7 stars on Moon footstep? An elder from the Fist faction sharply noticed Yi Qingtang's rapidly moving footsteps. Her pair of legs were unusually nimble, and although its movements appeared messy, it actually followed a pattern. 7 stars on Moon footstep? Isn't that one of the must-learns from that person? Elder Qin asked in surprise. The Fist faction elder frowned slightly and took a closer look. It seems like it, but it's a little different. I saw fragments of the 7 stars on Moon footstep scroll by chance only once and cannot verify it. Moreover, that lord had already disappeared for a long time. Since that big battle, it is unknown whether he is still alive or not. Now is not the time to consider these. The first wave of attack is ending soon. If the sword array still cannot be shut down, the second wave of attack in the absolute kill sword array will directly shoot out millions of lightsabers. Even the 8-trigram stage would be destroyed, much less Yi Qingtang. Elder Qin took a deep breath and turned to look at Elder Lin beside him. Elder Lin frowned deeply. Instantly, he turned around and headed outside. On the 8-trigram stage, Yi Qingtang's alertness was raised to the extreme. As her quickly turning wrists held on the sword to hit the flying lightsabers continuously, it was already numbed by the force of the impact. At this instant, Yi Qingtang really could not laugh at all. The sword array that she initially thought she could pass easily actually changed suddenly. This change shocked Yi Qingtang extremely, and she could only use the footstep that she used to save her life in her previous life. Yi Qingtang obtained this set of footsteps coincidentally in her previous life. Initially, she did not think that there was anything special about it, but after practicing and mastering it, she found out its secret. It could be said that this set of footsteps helped her escape in the many times she was surrounded by enemies in her previous life. She had no intention of using it in the assessment, but now she had to use it even if she did not want to. As Yi Qingtang cautiously countered the attack of the lightsabers, her mind was constantly thinking about the sudden change in the sword array. In her previous life when she entered Xianling sect, she had entered the sword array as well. Nothing abnormal happened to it then, and she had never heard of any accidents in the sword array assessment in the previous years before. How did everything detract from history's track? Could it be A shocking thought suddenly appeared in Yi Qingtang's mind. In her previous life, she had never used the power of the heart of the demon god. Thus, there was nothing to worry about. However, now, the spirit root in her body was formed using the heart of the demon god. Even if Yi Qingtang could hide the heart of the demon god and not let anyone else discover it, the sword array only sensed one's aura and would not be misled by any other thing. Could it be that the sword array suddenly became this violent because it sensed the heart of the demon god in her body? At the thought, Yi Qingtang could not help but break out in a cold sweat. Despite all her calculations, she missed out on the sensory ability of the sword in the stone. It was really too careless. Yi Qingtang was quietly vexed over her carelessness, but her limbs did not dare to relax a little. If she was slightly careless and got stabbed by the lightsaber, she might be buried here. Chapter 114. Yi Qingtang was unaware of how many lightsabers she had hid away already. As the red light in the sky faded bit by bit, Yi Qingtang still could not be at ease. She did not forget that this was a sword array that would continue on for eternity as long as it was not shut down. When she hit the last lightsaber away, she suddenly heard the middle-aged man's screams. Yi Qingtang, quickly take this time to leave the 8-trigram stage. The middle-aged man, who was still unable to shut down the sword array, reminded her immediately without caring about anything else when he saw Yi Qingtang single-handedly blocking the first wave of attack. Yi Qingtang did not say anything else and found a good opportunity to flee from the 8-trigram stage. However, just as her toes reached the sides of the 8-trigram stage, a red light emerged from the sides of the 8-trigram stage. A strong air stream violently flowed through Yi Qingtang. The entire 8-trigram stage was enclosed by a circle of red light instantly. Yi Qingtang's heart was in her mouth immediately. The sword in the stone definitely had discovered the presence of the heart of the demon god. Otherwise, why would there be such a big move to trap her on the 8-trigram stage so persistently until she dies? The middle-aged man below the 8-trigram stage was taken aback as well. He had been in Xianling's sect for many years and was in charge of the assessment many times, but he had never seen the sword array become like this. And at that instant, a piercing sound was sounded by the sword in the stone once again. This time, lightsabers numbering more than 10 times the lightsabers in the first wave suddenly flew up the sky, and in the encirclement of the red light, the surrounding was tainted by the scarlet light like fresh blood, resulting in a patch of crimson. Yi Qingtang looked up. Her black and white eyes reflected countless scarlet lightsabers as though the color of blood filled her eyes. At that very instant, the little black ball within the heart of the demon god was utterly panicking. It could feel the danger that Yi Qingtang was going to face. It wanted to take over the little lightning dragon's body and block everything for Yi Qingtang, but realized that the little lightning dragon's body was still frail and could not withstand the little black ball's occupation since the little black ball took over the little lightning dragon's body once on the journey here. Mother! Mother! The little black ball could only roar irritably within the heart of the demon god. Countless lightsabers hovered above the 8-trigram stage. Under the glimmer of the red light, the middle-aged man outside the 8-trigram stage was completely taken aback. This was it. This was really it. Even if Yi Qingtang had 3 heads and 6 limbs, she would still be unable to block this wave of the absolute kill sword array. Yi Qingtang took a deep breath, narrowing her eyes as she tightened her grip on the sword in her hand. She definitely could not die here. Just when the lightsabers were about to attack, a loud blast suddenly sounded from the sword in the stone. Along with the piercing blast, the sky of lightsabers instantly became an illusion, fading away as they flew down. Yi Qingtang watched the tip of a lightsaber, which was just under her nose, turn into a ball of red light and fall on the ground quietly. The red light that enveloped the 8-trigram stage completely vanished at that moment. Instantly, the entire 8-trigram stage returned to calmness as though the life-and-death struggle a while ago ceased to exist. Yi Qingtang was slightly surprised but did not dare to rush into any action, and her hand which held the sword was on alert for a long time. Outside the 8-trigram stage, the middle-aged man who was covered in goosebumps suddenly felt a slight tremble in the psychic tablet. The sword array is turned off, Let her come down. Elder Lin's slightly exhausted voice sounded from the psychic tablet. Chapter 115. The middle-aged man was shocked, but he understood the situation. Once the absolute kill sword array started, it could only be closed by a sword faction elder. However, Elder Lin might have used quite a lot of energy to shut down the absolute kill sword array so urgently. Yes, replied the middle-aged man as he looked up at Yi Qingtang on the 8 trigram stage. Yi Qingtang, the sword array is turned off already. You can come down. On the 8 trigram stage, Yi Qingtang's breathing was rather hurried. It had not been a month since her spirit root rebuilt, and her body still experienced the pain of having a spirit root dug out. Thus, she had not fully regained her strength. Under normal circumstances, she would have definitely died in the sword array. She was able to live until now only because of the experiences she accumulated in her previous life when fleeing for her life. Yi Qingtang took a deep breath and calmed her erratic breathing, though her heart was already on alert. There were many magical objects on Earth, and who knew which of them would be able to sense the aura of the heart of the demon god? She really had to be even more careful in the future. Moreover, she did not know whether Xianling's sect found any clues. The middle-aged man could not help but admire Yi Qingtang when he saw that she was not at all flustered even though she seemed exhausted. If it were to be any other candidate, they most likely would have died in the sword array. It was indeed unusual for Yi Qingtang, however, to stay this calm and composed and even be so indifferent after the incident. Senior, do I need to retake this sword array assessment? Yi Qingtang's first sentence upon coming down from the 8 trigram stage stunned the middle-aged man. Retake the assessment? The middle-aged man took a look at the messy 8 trigram stage and felt a shiver down his spine. There was a sudden change to the sword array, and God knows what abnormality actually happened. Under such circumstances, the sword faction would definitely not start up the sword array again within a short period of time. Nonetheless, it was good that Yi Qingtang was the last candidate. There is no need. You can just head straight to the location of the 3rd segment, the middle-aged man said. Yi Qingtang did not say anything further. She had used up too much energy just now, and her body did not have a strong foundation from the start. Using all her energy in a fight like this had physically exhausted her. Luckily, Yi Qingtang knew that the 3rd segment did not require too much energy. After a slight nod, Yi Qingtang left, and her anxious heart calmed down a little. If she could continue taking the assessment, it meant that Xianling's sect did not discover the heart of the demon god. Now she could rest assured. When Yi Qingtang headed for the location of the 3rd segment, the 4 elders' hearts were heavy. Elder Lin, why did the absolute kill sword array start without a reason? Elder Qin looked towards a rather exhausted Elder Lin who was walking back slowly. It is still unknown as of now. I have ordered sword faction disciples to close the sword array down temporarily. I will investigate in detail after this assessment. Elder Lin's complexion was pale. Once the absolute kill sword array started, only he and Xianling's sect master could forcefully turn it off by using large amounts of energy. He urgently closed the absolute kill sword array just now, and thus his breathing was still erratic. I hope such incidences will not happen again. The sword array is not set up only for candidates. If we face external enemies and the sword array experiences an abnormality, it would be unfavorable to the sect, Elder Qin said with a slight front. From his point of view, the sword array was administered by the sword faction, and it was definitely the sword faction's responsibility now that something happened to it. This time, Elder Lin did not talk back, and a deep frown sat on his face. He himself could not understand why the absolute kill sword array started up for no reason. Forget it. There is no accident in the end. Just pay more attention in the future, said the Fist faction elder, who stood up as a mediator. Chapter 116, that's right. The sword array assessment had already ended, and there should not be any more problems in the future. I believe Elder Lin will be more careful in the future, echoed the herbal faction elder. Elder Qin scoffed secretly. The sword faction was powerful, so naturally, the Fist and herbal factions would be biased towards Elder Lin. Just because nothing happened doesn't mean that there isn't a problem. Previously, you all thought that Yi Qingtang's spirit root was too inferior, yet who would have thought that she could actually withstand the absolute kill sword array? Honestly speaking, what do you think will happen if it happened to other candidates? Even if it was Lu Xiaowen from the formidable Heavens Royals or Yun Shu from the Lu Yun family clan, they would most probably die should they encounter the absolute kill sword array, wouldn't they? Elder Qin's words were rather sharp. As his voice sounded, Elder Lin's expression turned even uglier. The appearance of the absolute kill sword array was unexpected, but what made him more shocked was the fact that Yi Qingtang could actually bear its attacks. As seen, Yi Qingtang does have some abilities. She is obviously first for the sword array segment today, said the herbal faction elder thoughtfully with a hint of admiration towards Yi Qingtang in his tone. Lu Xiaowen and Yun Shu's results were already the best, but they went through only the weakened sword array. Moreover, they only withstood the attack of a few dozen lightsabers. However, Yi Qingtang, in the absolute kill sword array, she dealt with hundreds of lightsabers and retreated safely. Such a splendid record was indeed stunning. None of the outer sect disciples would have performed better than her, much less other candidates. Yi Qingtang, whom they had been pessimistic towards, brought them surprise after surprise. Not only was the herbal faction elder shocked over this, even the fist faction elder could not help but pay more attention to her. There is a strong correlation between the fact that she could bear the absolute kill sword array and that set of footsteps. If those footsteps really originated from the 7 stars on Moon footstep and she could retreat safely, it is also not impossible. Elder Lin took a deep breath, though he was still unwilling to approve of Yi Qingtang. As he said this, his eyes were obviously looking at Elder Qin, who had been strongly supporting Yi Qingtang all this while. Upon hearing Elder Qin's words, the 2 elders from the herbal and fist factions felt that it was logical. After all, the 7 stars on Moon footstep was that mighty figure's special skill which allowed him to retreat safely even when surrounded by hordes of troops. Elder Qin scoffed. He knew that Elder Lin was using Yi Qingtang's incident to go against him, but he was also unwilling to argue with Elder Lin any further. The place of the 3rd segment was much simpler. A huge stone pillar stood on top of the clouds. It was 10 meters tall and could only be encircled with the joint force of 4 grown men. Large lifelike dragons were carved on the stone pillar, making it appear very majestic. A black stone slate, with a dimension of 1 square meter, was hung on the stone pillar. Yi Qingtang rushed up to where other candidates stood, but her pale complexion attracted both Yun Shu and Lu Ziyuan's attention. "Miss Yi, are you all right?" Yun Shu stood forward and asked. Yi Qingtang shook her head slightly, but her lack of strength made her look frail. Not anyone can go up against the sword array. Looking at Yi Qingtang's miserable appearance and estimating the time, Lu Xiaowen knew that she withstood 1 wave of attack at most. Ultimately, a red spirit root is still a red spirit root. There was no way she could make any shocking achievements. Yi Qingtang glanced at Lu Xiaowen, and a sneer hung on the corner of her lips. There was still 1 more segment in the assessment, and she wanted to see how exciting Lu Ziyuan's expression would be when the final results were revealed. Chapter 117. Yi Qingtang was the only candidate who solved the illusion array and was obviously ranked first in the 1st segment of the assessment. As for the sword array, although there was a sudden abnormality, Yi Qingtang was very clear that it was enough to suppress everyone just based on the fact that she withstood the 1st wave of attack thus. As long as she was not ranked the last few in the 3rd segment of the assessment, she was confident that she would be able to enter Xianling's sect. "Miss Yi, there is no need to argue with him," Yun Shu comforted Yi Qingtang. Lu Xiaowen had been arrogant for a long period of time and was also a prince, hence, he would not allow anyone to disobey him. While there was nothing to pick on about Yi Qingtang's words before she stepped on the path to heaven, it had already planted the seeds of dissatisfaction in Lu Ziyuan's heart. All of this fell into Yun Shu's eyes, and his opinion of Lu Xiaowen became worse. "I know," Yi Qingtang chuckled as her eyes could not help but land on Yun Shu. Previously, she was only focused on her own assessment and, in turn, neglected something. In the previous 2 segments, Yun Shu and Lu Ziyuan's assessment results were about the same and were considered to be outstanding. With such top-notch performances, their natural talents should be around the same. However, Yi Qingtang frowned slightly. In her previous life when Yi Qingtang entered Xianling sect, Yun Shu and Lu Xiuwen had long entered Xianling sect for many years. But then, Lu Xiuwen had become the best disciple in the outer sect and was only one step away from becoming an inner sect disciple. Everyone in the outer sect all the more followed his lead and was very respectful towards him. Rather, it was Yun Shu who had a similar level of natural talent that seemed miserable. Although the Yun Shu then was still skilled, it was far from his stunning performance today. Being in the outer sect seemed a little commonplace. If one were to say that Yun Shu could not win a spar against Lu Xiuwen, Yi Qingtang would definitely not believe it. Many thoughts ran across Yi Qingtang's mind. She had a feeling that something must have happened after Yun Shu entered Xianling sect. Otherwise, he would not have fallen to that ordinary state as in the previous lifetime. However, the Yun Shu in the previous life had never mentioned any related incident even until death, and Yi Qingtang did not know anything about it now. She could only bury all the confusion in her heart temporarily and start observing after entering Xianling sect. Just when Yi Qingtang was thinking about it, the third segment of the assessment had already started. The middle-aged man announced the contents of the third segment in front of everyone. All candidates will come forward one by one and hit the black stone slate hung on the stone pillar with their fists. The results of the assessment would be decided by the degree of damage done to the stone slate. Candidates, who had been afraid for a long time, heaved a heavy sigh of relief at the third segment of the assessment. After going through the unpredictable illusion array as well as the dangerous sword array, the third segment unexpectedly looked very easy. They did not need to be worried about being frightened anymore. The previous two segments had already drained the strength of all candidates. If they were to go through any intense assessments now, there would most likely be no prideful results. It was just hitting a stone slate. How hard could it be? The first candidate went up the array without any burden from before. Gathering all his strength, he let out a loud roar and heavily punched at the dark, black stone slate. A loud boom was heard as all his strength was put in the punch on the stone slate. However, a shocking scene appeared. This hit with all his might only made a faint dent on that stone slate that was a finger thick. Chapter 118. The candidate who landed the punch was dumbfounded. As he looked at the faint and almost invisible dent, his face, which was full of confidence a moment ago, turned a little stiff. How could this be? The candidate widened his eyes as he looked at the dent, which was at most the thickness of a leaf, repair itself bit by bit. The whole slate returned to its initial state before his eyes as though he had not touched it at all before. This slate. Next, the middle-aged man directly ended the candidate's assessment without giving him any time to struggle. The stiff-faced candidate was instantly like a defeated rooster as he left dejectedly. It shouldn't be? No matter how bad, a punch from a person with an orange spirit root should be able to break such a thin piece of stone. How can it be? Discussions over the strangeness of the stone slate started amongst the candidates. This seemingly simple third segment appeared to be completely different from what they thought. Yun Shu's eyes swept over that stone slate, and a bright light glistened in his eyes suddenly after thinking for a while. This is the invasive stone. The invasive stone was an extremely rare mineral. Although it looked like there was no difference from normal stones, this type of stone possessed ductility that normal ores did not. It was completely different from the other stones that could be broken easily and was, instead, extremely ductile. If one used only their strength to hit it, all the strength would be resolved by the invasive stone, and there would not be a single bit of damage on it. The candidates, who thought it was merely an easily broken stone slate, felt dark clouds looming over them upon hearing invasive stone. If one had no understanding of the fist intent for a long period of time, it would be difficult to punch a hole in this thing even if one were to punch it for 10 days and nights straight. The group of people was about to cry. It was all because they were too naive to see Xianling sect's trap. After knowing that it was the invasive stone, the subsequent candidates did not dare to use pure force to hit it. However, they were all quite young, and even if they practiced martial arts from young, they still had a very limited understanding with regards to the fist intent. Moreover, Xianling sect was famous for its sword faction, and most of the candidates were talented in swordsmanship. As for fist intent, they really did not know much. Candidates went forward one after another. Most only managed to make a faint dent on the invasive stone like the first candidate, while others who were slightly better were able to make a dent as deep as half a finger. Lu Xiaowen was relatively outstanding in this segment. With a punch, he almost broke the invasive stone and even spread his strength, shattering dents all over. Streaks of tiny cracks appeared on the ever-ductile invasive stone for the first time. The fist faction elders saw the scene through the water moon mirror, and praise could be seen in his eyes. This Lu Xiaowen may have come into contact with boxing before. The formidable Heavens Royals have always spent time on training martial arts, Elder Lin said. At the location of assessment, Lu Xiaowen was satisfied as he looked at the result of his punch and retreated to a side. As this segment was the last assessment, all the candidates had not left and only retreated to a side. They would leave once all candidates finished their assessment. Lu Xiaowen stood at a side with his eyes fixed on Yun Shu, who went up after him. After Yun Shu hit the invasive stone, a deep dent was formed, but not a single crack appeared. Lu Xiaowen saw this, and a proud expression finally appeared in his eyes. Chapter 119. Simply based on boxing skills, Lu Xiaowen is slightly better than Yun Shu, said the fist faction elder as he observed carefully. Yun Shu's swordsmanship is better than Lu Ziyuan's, Elder Lin said. However, both of them have pretty strong foundations and also green spirit roots. I believe that once they enter the sect, they will be to our liking with a little more training. Elder Lin said assertively, implying that he had already approved of Lu Xiaowen and Yun Shu passing the entrance assessment. The other elders did not have much to say about this, as they were optimistic about those two people as well. Only Yi Qingtang is left. Through the water moon mirror, the herbal faction elders saw Yi Qingtang walking towards the invasive stone step by step. I wonder how she will do this time, Elder Qin said as he looked at Yi Qingtang with a complicated expression. In the previous two segments, Yi Qingtang steadily won against everyone. If her spirit root were just a little better, she would be able to pass the entrance assessment even if her results in the third segment were not good. However, Elder Lin glanced at Elder Qin with sarcasm filled in his eyes. Even he was surprised that Yi Qingtang could pass the previous two segments successfully and obtain stunning results. However, Yi Qingtang was at most 15, and her spirit root was extremely inferior. Even if she trained hard, she would not be proficient in everything. As long as Yi Qingtang does not pass the third segment, Xianling sect would definitely not let her enter the sect. No matter how regretful Elder Qin would be, it was still pointless. At this point, not only the four faction elders' attention was focused on Yi Qingtang, even the surrounding candidates looked at the tiny figure one after another. Once Yi Qingtang finished this segment of the assessment, the sect assessment would end, and they would know very quickly whether they were qualified to enter Xianling sect. Yi Qingtang was slightly pale, but it was not because of the invasive stone. It was only because she used too much energy in the absolute kill sword array a while ago. Thus, she looked frail at that point in time. Looking at the dark, black invasive stone before her, there was not a slight hint of emotion in Yi Qingtang's eyes. She stood there quietly and did not hit it immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath and closed her eyes slowly in her mind. Memories from her previous life flashed across scene by scene. Suddenly, Yi Qingtang opened her eyes, and a sharp light shone in her clear, black orbs. The energy around her whole body flowed and gathered in her left fist. This slight change shocked the candidates around her. They could faintly sense that a strong aura was being emitted from Yi Qingtang's body. This aura was simply not what a person with a red spirit root could possess. Just when everyone was astonished over Yi Qingtang's action, Yi Qingtang planted her feet firmly on the ground, and the fist which contained all the strength was suddenly hit against the ever-ductile invasive stone. Like a passing breeze, there was not a slight sound in the huge venue. Everyone's eyes were focused on Yi Qingtang's fist, which landed on the invasive stone. Below that fair fist, the invasive stone was not at all damaged, and there was not even the faintest dent. Ha! Someone in the crowd suddenly let out a mocking laugh. Suddenly, small sounds rang. The middle-aged man who was in charge of the assessment was taken aback as well. Perhaps it was because Yi Qingtang's performance was too remarkable in the previous 2 assessments that he unconsciously thought that Yi Qingtang would definitely perform well in the 3rd segment. This thought had never disappeared even when he saw Yi Qingtang directing her energy. Yet, unexpectedly. Chapter 120. Not only was Yi Qingtang not outstanding, but she also ended up in such an ugly position instead. Looking at the perfectly flawless invasive stone, the middle-aged man could not help but sigh. Yi Qingtang was already placed at the bottom in the 3rd segment. With such results, it would be impossible for her to enter Xianling's sect with a red spirit root. The assessment has ended. All candidates are to move to the entrance of the sect. The results will be announced in a while, said the middle-aged man without emotion as he brushed away the regret in his heart. Yi Qingtang stood before the invasive stone with a complicated expression, causing one to not understand what was going on. Upon seeing such an outcome, Lu Xiuwen was already all sneers as he knew that there was no chance for Yi Qingtang to enter the Xianling sect with such results. Lucky that he did not need to be bothered about her anymore. This kind of person was simply not worth his time and energy at all. Candidates left successively, but Yi Qingtang stood before the invasive stone without moving a step. Looking at the pale face, the middle-aged man could not bear it, but he knew the sect's strictness. While it was regretful, there was already no way to save the situation. Miss Yi, should we leave? Yun Shu walked forward and looked at Yi Qingtang's side profile worriedly. Yi Qingtang suddenly returned to her senses, and after taking a final look at the invasive stone, she turned around and left with Yun Shu. Looking at the 2 walking away, the middle-aged man shook his head regretfully. In the sect, the 4 faction elders all had weird expressions upon witnessing the sight. Elder Lin sat on a chair and lifted his chin slightly as he looked at Elder Qin with disdain and sarcasm. Elder Qin had a slightly ugly expression but did not say anything. Seeing this, the Fist faction elder passed a message through the psychic tablet to the middle-aged man in charge of the assessment. The assessment has ended. Bring the invasive stone down first. The Fist faction was in charge of this segment, and the invasive stone was normally used by the Fist faction disciples for training. Now that the assessment ended, he would obviously want to bring it back. The middle-aged man heard the message and, without thinking anything else, brought the hanging invasive stone down as ordered. However, just when the middle-aged man took the invasive stone down, there was suddenly a crisp sound coming from the stone pillar which the invasive stone was originally hung on. The middle-aged man instinctively looked up, and what laid before his eyes stunned him there and then as though he was struck by lightning. Tiny cracks appeared on the strong and huge stone pillar right in front of him. From where the invasive stone was hung, the tiny cracks stretched to the rest of the stone pillar rapidly as if they were fiery sparks. In just the blink of an eye, that huge stone pillar split open before his eyes, and tiny cracks directly dismembered the entire stone pillar. Suddenly, countless lumps of gravel fell, and the entire stone pillar collapsed in a moment with a loud bang. The scene left the middle-aged man completely dumbfounded. The invasive stone was extremely ductile, but the stone pillar was made from white corundum. Even knives and guns would not be able to damage it easily, much less the force of one's limbs. However, it actually turned into a lump of gravel right before his eyes. The candidates, who had already started talking about the assessment, as well as the 4 faction elders through the water moon mirror, were attracted over by the loud roar. When they turned around and saw the scattered mess, astonishment was written all over the 4 elders' faces. Chapter 121. What is going on? The herbal faction elder was a little dumbfounded. This white corundum was extremely hard. How could it crack just like this? The other elders also had a look of confusion. Only the Fist faction elder seemed to have thought of something, as he suddenly stood up and said, "Invisible force." Yi Qingtang actually knows the invisible force technique? The invisible force was one of the more profound fist techniques amongst all the fist arts and was similar to the hitting the cattle from across the mountain technique. However, it was very difficult to see anything strange when one punched. This type of fist technique would not bring any damage to the object being punched, but the fist's force will be transferred backward from the first object that was hit. If there were no objects or living beings backing the first object from behind, then the punch would directly crush the core of the first object. Previously, the fist faction elder thought that Yi Qingtang really did not know any fist arts and did not use enough force, which was why there was no trace of damage on the invasive stone. Seeing things now, however, he had thought wrong. On usual assessments, there was a certain distance between the invasive stone and the white corundum, but this time, he specially ordered his disciples to stick the invasive stone against the white corundum without leaving any gap before the third segment started in order to prevent an accident similar to that in the sword array from happening. Which also meant, if it was on a normal day, Yi Qingtang's punch would definitely crush the entire invasive stone from the inside. Unexpectedly, the slight adjustment made by the fist faction elder made the white corundum pillar bear all the force from Yi Qingtang's punch. At that moment, the fist faction elder's expression changed rapidly. Under the constant questioning of other elders, he said the reason. After the elders heard the explanation, the smile on Elder Lin's face fell apart while a smile slowly formed on Elder Qin's face. I really did not expect Yi Qingtang to have such abilities. Elder Qin praised Yi Qingtang openly with no intention of concealing it. The fist faction elder laughed bitterly as well. This invisible force technique does not use the spirit root's power, and it can amplify one's force to the extreme. It is indeed very suitable for her to use, however, it is difficult to train, and there would be barely any success with less than 10 years of training. Yi Qingtang is only 15. Could it be that she started training the invisible force technique ever since she was 5 years old? Guesses filled the few elders' minds as they saw Yi Qingtang's stunning performance. Could be. Previously, when the grade of Yi Qingtang's spirit root was revealed, I thought it was strange. Mu Su knows the sex rules, and if he really recommended a red spirit root person here, it might not be a good thing for him. After all, we will only give one's chance for assessment. If the person Mu Su recommended doesn't pass the assessment, it will not look good on him as well. Elder Qin thought for a while and continued. It must be that Yi Qingtang knows her spirit root is not good enough and, thus, painstakingly trained other things. Mu Su realized this and made an exception to recommend her to our sect. All the elders found Elder Qin's words logical. However, they would need to make a change to the issue that they discussed a while ago. Yi Qingtang ranked first in all 3 segments of the assessment. Even if she has a red spirit root, we should still give a chance to such a skilled youth like her. The fist faction elder was also in approval of Yi Qingtang's mastery of the invisible force technique and, naturally, did not object. Similarly, the herbal faction elder was amiable and did not object. The only elder who had not expressed his view was Elder Lin, who had always been on opposing ends with Elder Qin. Chapter 122. Outside the main entrance of Xianling sect stood hundreds of candidates. At that instant, everyone could not help but become nervous. The 3 segments of assessment for the Xianling sect revolved around the array, sword and fist factions, respectively. The other herbal faction was not what candidates could participate in. The results of the 3 segments decided whether they were able to step into Xianling sect's main entrance today and become a sect disciple. Once they entered the sect, they would no longer be the same as ordinary people. Regardless of the sect's halo or the rare treasures in the sect, both were full of spirit energy, and this was a very appealing attraction for ambitious youth like them. If they were able to enter the sect, not just them, but the entire family clan would be proud of the fact. Time passed, and everyone seemed uneasy. Only 3 people were calm. Lu Xiuwen and Yun Shu's results were outstanding in all 3 segments, and their spirit roots were excellent. Thus, they had nothing to be worried about. The only remaining person was Yi Qingtang. At that moment, Yi Qingtang stood aside with her eyes looked down. She was confused as to why she was not able to crush the invasive stone with her punch just now. In other candidates' eyes, her silence was a display of her despair. Her spirit root was the most inferior, and that had already become her fatal point. Although other candidates did not see Yi Qingtang's results in the previous 2 segments of the assessment, it should be extremely terrible when estimating according to the duration of her assessment. Moreover, in the 3rd segment, Yi Qingtang did not even leave a trace of damage on the invasive stone with her punch. Even if the results were not out, they were aware. Yi Qingtang did not have the slightest chance of entering the sect. There was no shortage of people gloating at her misfortune. Previously, when Yi Qingtang was the first to step on the path to heaven, they were already in a bad mood as they were outshone by someone with a red spirit root. Looking at Yi Qingtang's miserable state now, they were proud to be superior to her. However, most of the candidates did not pay much attention to Yi Qingtang and were more preoccupied with their own results. Yun Shu stood beside Yi Qingtang all along. There were a few times where he wanted to comfort Yi Qingtang yet felt that not saying anything and giving silence was the best choice. "Brother Yun, what do you think will be the results of this assessment?" Lu Xiaowen walked up and stared at Yun Shu, who he believed was his only competitor, without looking at Yi Qingtang at all. "The results are not out yet. It is simply the sect's judgment," Yun Shu said without emotion. Lu Xiaowen and he did not share the same values from the start, and thus he naturally did not want to speak much. The sect's judgment is, of course, important, but Brother Yun should be clear whether you and I will be able to enter the sect. Since you already have an idea, why do you still need to waste your time? From now on, some people will be completely different from you and me. Lu Xiaowen did not mention anything about Yi Qingtang, but every word he said was directed against her. Yun Shu frowned slightly. Lu Xiaowen chuckled lightly and looked at Yi Qingtang. "Yi Qingtang, I remember very clearly the words you made me remember a while ago. I said if you could enter Xianling's sect, won't I be a useless piece of trash? Now, it is enough to prove that my words weren't wrong, isn't it?" Lu Xiaowen sneered. Yi Qingtang swept her eyes across Lu Xiaowen, and a seeming smile played on her lips. Whether it is right or wrong, it is still too early to decide now. Chapter 123. Why is it still too early? Lu Xiaowen scoffed as he lifted his chin and glanced over at Yi Qingtang with despise. Perhaps someone has no self-awareness and is still struggling hard when death is at hand? Yi Qingtang did not bother with Lu Xiaowen's ridicule anymore and stood there silently, waiting for the moment when the results were released. As for Lu Xiaowen, he was unwilling to waste any more saliva on someone with no qualification to enter the sect. After taking a look at her, he stood aside, only wanting to see the moment when Yi Qingtang's hopes were dashed. Her expression would be so satisfying to watch. Not long later, the middle-aged man who was in charge of the assessment appeared in front of them once again. All the candidates trembled and strained their ears, waiting for the revelation of the final results. This assessment is finished, and our sect already knows of everyone's performance. Now, the names that I read out are those who have passed the assessment and have the qualification to become an outer sect disciple of Xianling sect, the middle-aged man said sternly as he looked over the crowd. Everyone's eyes were focused on one point. They eagerly hoped to hear their name from the middle-aged man's mouth. Su Wan. The middle-aged man read the first name. A beautiful young girl walked out from the many candidates. Delight and agitation were written all over her lovely face. Suppressing all her emotions, she tried hard to remain calm and walked in front of everyone. From this moment on, she was a disciple of Xianling sect. Many envious gazes landed on her successively, and upon feeling those eyes on her, she took a deep breath and lifted her chin. The middle-aged man continued, "Mou." A handsome young man was the second to walk up. Compared to Su Wan, his expression was relatively calmer, but the agitation in his eyes revealed his inner feelings. These two people both had a yellow spirit root and were outstanding in the sword array and invasive stone assessment. Passing the assessment was not unexpected to others. As the middle-aged man read out name after name, a group of people amongst all the candidates were in utter despair. Until then, the middle-aged man had already read out over 10 names, but all of them had yellow spirit roots without exception. Until then, a candidate with an orange spirit root had not appeared, and this made those with an orange spirit root rather disheartened. The gap in the grade of spirit root really could not be crossed. Even if their performance was similar, those with yellow spirit roots were prioritized and chosen. Moreover, just based on performance, almost none of those with an orange spirit root could win against those with a yellow spirit root. The initially hopeful candidates with orange spirit roots hung their heads low gloomily as the despair in their heart already told them the final outcome. Xianling's sect did not need people with such an inferior spirit root like them. Lu Xiuwen, the middle-aged man said again. Lu Xiuwen, who was prepared long ago, stepped out of the envious crowd with a face full of confidence and not a single hint of agitation. With his ability, it was to be expected for him to enter the sect. What he wanted was not just a placement as an outer sect disciple of Xianling's sect. In the future, he would want even more things. Yun Shu walked forward immediately after. The assessment results for both of them were within the expectations of everyone. There was nothing surprising about it. Until then, all the names of the candidates were read out in reverse order. As Lu Xiuwen and Yun Shu's assessment results were revealed, those whose names were not read out completely gave up hope. Chapter 124. To them, Xianling's sect was just an extravagant desire. Lu Xiuwen stood in line with those selected, but his gaze fell on Yi Qingtang, who was amongst those who did not make it. He did not conceal the sarcasm and arrogance on his face as he looked at Yi Qingtang as though he was looking at a lowly ant. Yi Qingtang looked closely. This is the gap between you and me. The moment you leave Xianling's sect, the formidable Heavens Royals will prepare a large enough surprise for you. Just when everyone thought that the assessment had come to an end and was about to leave dishearteningly, the middle-aged man who had been silent for quite some time suddenly opened his mouth once again. Yi Qingtang. 3 simple syllables without any fluctuation. But when that name fell into everyone's ears, disbelief appeared on everyone's faces. Yi Qingtang? That Yi Qingtang with only a red spirit root? How could this be? Everyone could not believe their ears and suspected if the middle-aged man read the wrong name. But when they saw Yi Qingtang walking out from the crowd with no emotion on her face and stood on the side of the selected candidates, everyone went crazy. How could this be? How did Yi Qingtang pass the assessment? This is impossible. How can she enter Xianling's sect with that kind of result in the third segment? The group of people who were initially sorrowful over not being selected into Xianling's sect completely boiled over at that moment. Previously, those people whose names were read out were pretty skilled and had good spirit roots. They knew that they could not be compared to them. Thus, even if they were not content, they could only accept it. However, Yi Qingtang was selected? On what basis? So many people with yellow and orange spirit roots were rejected by the sect. What right does someone with a tiny red spirit root have to be selected into Xianling's sect? As everyone was in a flurry, Yi Qingtang had already stood upright. She was not at all affected by this result. Upon seeing Yi Qingtang walking to the side, the arrogant smile on Lu Xiuwen's face completely fell. Shock filled his eyes. He was simply unable to believe that Yi Qingtang actually passed the assessment. What kind of joke was this? Everyone started discussing gradually, turning the place extremely noisy. Seeing the sight, the middle-aged man who finished reading all the candidates' name frowned slightly with an ugly expression on his face. Today's assessment has all ended, and those selected are confirmed. Non-disciples of Xianling's sect will be sent away immediately. If anyone dares to make noise outside Xianling's sect, he or she will be punished according to the sect's rules. The stern scolding was like a shocking thunder that suddenly struck all those discussion sounds into broken pieces. Everyone kept their mouth shut at that moment. Now, they were no longer candidates but a group of sad people who had no fate with the sect. How could a noble sect allow them to scream and shout here? Everyone remained silent as dissatisfaction and despair overwhelmed them. The middle-aged man was simply unwilling to waste any more time on the group of people and turned to face the selected candidates including Yi Qingtang. From now on, you all are outer sect disciples of Xianling's sect. follow me into the sect." "Yes," everyone replied simultaneously. Without saying anything more, the middle-aged man turned around and stepped into the sect's entrance. Behind him were over 10 young boys and girls in high spirits. At that moment, they could not care about how Yi Qingtang entered the sect. As long as they ensured that they could enter the sect, it was already very fortunate. From the start to the end, only Lu Ziyuan's shocked eyes never left Yi Qingtang. Chapter 125. Yi Qingtang sensed Lu Ziyuan's gaze. This time, she turned around slightly, and a maddening smile formed on her face. "Lu Xiuan, do you still remember what you said previously? If even you can enter the sect, won't I be a useless piece of trash?" The sentence Lu Xiuan said initially smashed on himself like a huge rock. Never had Lu Xiuan dreamt that Yi Qingtang could really enter Xianling's sect. His good-looking face turned blue as though he was given 2 big slaps publicly, making him look extremely ugly. Lu Xiuan secretly clenched his teeth and forcefully suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart without taking another look at Yi Qingtang. Otherwise, he would really be pissed to death by her. The days ahead are still long. There was still a long time in Xianling's sect in the future. He would definitely not allow such a lowly Yi Qingtang to succeed. Lu Ziyuan's reactions fell into Yi Qingtang's eyes. She was very happy and satisfied. In this life, she needed to return back to Lu Xiuan hundreds and even 1,000 times the pain that he had brought her in her previous life. The days ahead were still long. She has the time. "Congratulations, Miss Yi." A gentle voice sounded beside Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang turned around and saw her senior brother Yun's good man smile and his sincere eyes. "Now, we're all disciples of Xianling's sect. Don't address me as Miss Yi now. Is it fine if I call you senior brother Yun?" Yi Qingtang looked at Yun Shu smilingly. Though she was like a devil, she distinguished kindness and hatred clearly. She would not forget Yun Shu's kindness towards her. Yun Shu was stunned. He felt that Yi Qingtang's smile was like a sunny day in March, so bright that he felt a little dizzy. She said senior brother Yun so naturally as though she had been long familiar with such a form of address. Yun Shu returned to his senses and quietly laughed at his weird thought, as today was the first time he met Yi Qingtang. "That is my honor, junior sister." Hearing the words junior sister made it seem as if Yi Qingtang returned to her previous life. The senior brother Yun who protected her throughout her most miserable period of time finally returned. Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes. She had not forgotten her previous suspicions. Now that she entered Xianling's sect together with Yun Shu, she would be extremely careful and definitely investigate what exactly happened in the previous lifetime for such a bright and talented Yun Shu to be tortured into that abject state. In this life, it would be her who protects him. The friendly relationship between Yi Qingtang and Yun Shu fell into Lu Ziyuan's eyes. From the start, Yun Shu was the biggest competitor in his heart, and Yi Qingtang was even more a piece of trash that offended him. Seeing the two of them like that annoyed him even further. Xianling's sect's assessment ended, and the selected candidates were elated. The few elders within the sect who discussed the final outcome left successively and returned to their posts. Only Elder Qin stayed a little while at the water-moon mirror. As he looked at Yi Qingtang through the water-moon mirror, his eyes had a complicated expression, but more than that, they were filled with regret. "Elder Qin, the preparation for the Lingyu array is completed. Please return and take a look," said an array faction disciple as he invited Elder Qin to leave. Elder Qin sighed lightly. Such a pity, really such a pity. All of Yi Qingtang's performances stunned him deeply. If Yi Qingtang did not have a red spirit root, with just her level of talent, Elder Qin would definitely make an exception and directly accept her as an inner sect disciple of the array faction. However, ultimately, it was such a pity. Chapter 126. No one in 100 years would be able to compete against Yi Qingtang's results in the third segment. Even the dissatisfied Elder Lin did not speak a word about Yi Qingtang entering Xianling's sect. How was it that such a talented and amazing young girl had only a red spirit root? The more Elder Qin thought about it, the more despondent he was. If he had not known that a spirit root was hard to upgrade, he really would not give up. As long as Yi Qingtang had an orange or yellow spirit root, the other 3 sect elders would most probably want to fight over Yi Qingtang. However, Elder Qin could only sigh, shake his head, and leave. Once she entered the sect, how she developed herself from then on would be all up to her. At that very moment, Elder Lin, who left the assessment observation location, returned to the sword faction with a gloomy expression. Upon seeing Elder Lin's unhappy face, the sect disciples cautiously retreated to a side and bowed respectfully without daring to utter a word. Xianling's sect was famous for its sword faction, and the sword faction was the most important. All the disciples would need to enter the sword faction to practice swordsmanship, and thus, Elder Lin's position in Xianling's sect was self-evident. Returning to the main hall of the sword faction, Elder Lin sat on the chair with a deep frown. He felt a stifling feeling as he thought of Elder Qin's proud reaction upon knowing Yi Qingtang's real result for the 3rd segment. Elder Lin. A tall and handsome young man entered the hall and greeted Elder Lin obediently. Elder Lin was initially unhappy, but his stiff expression relaxed when he saw the young man. Ning Luo, is there anything that you're finding me for now? Elder Lin asked as he looked at the disciple before him whom he was extremely satisfied with. Regarding the absolute kill sword array, I have already brought people to investigate it. There is nothing strange about the sword array. However, it was used to fight against demonic beasts a few months ago, and perhaps it wasn't stable yet. I have already changed the raw stone in the sword array, and there should not be any more problems, Ning Luo said. Elder Lin nodded satisfyingly. Ning Luo, you're the disciple whom I think the most highly of. I have always been at ease with you handling matters. I do not wish for the sword array accident to happen again in the future. Do order people to keep a tighter eye on it. Yes, I will, Ning Luo replied. Is there any other thing? Elder Lin asked. Ning Luo paused as he saw Elder Lin's slightly gloomy expression from the corner of his eyes. I will definitely put in my best regarding the sword array, so please do not be troubled over it. Don't let it affect your health. Elder Lin was very comforted. Yet, once he thought of Elder Qin's expression when he asked whether Yi Qingtang passed the assessment, Elder Lin's face darkened again. I'm fine. It's only that the Array faction elder thinks highly of a disciple who newly entered the sect. To think that my Xianling sect would actually have a disciple with a red spirit root, it's very shameful, and we would be ridiculed by other sects. Red spirit root? Ning Luo was surprised as well. Elder Lin sneered. That disciple is Yi Qingtang. She was personally recommended by Mu Su, and Elder Lin thinks pretty highly of her. However, she is ultimately still a red spirit root and will not become anything big. I'm only afraid she would affect our sect's reputation. There were very few people with orange spirit roots in all sects, and it was such an absurdity that they accepted a red spirit root as an outer sect disciple. Ning Luo did not say anything, but upon hearing Yi Qingtang, a weird expression flashed across his eyes suddenly. Was not Yi Qingtang the person whom Yi Yu warned about? She really passed the sect assessment. Chapter 127. Whatever. You can go down first. It seemed that Elder Lin was unwilling to say anything more as he waved a hand and allowed Ning Luo to retreat first. Ning Luo left the main hall with many thoughts running across his head. Senior brother Ning, arrangements for the outer sect disciples are already made. I heard that there are 2 green spirit roots this time, said one inner sect disciple who went up to Ning Luo upon seeing him. Ning Luo returned to his senses and said flatly, even if they have green spirit roots, they're still merely outer sect disciples. We are from the inner sect. There's no need to be bothered with it. There was a big difference between the inner and outer sect. In every sect, there were many outer sect disciples, but everyone knew that only getting into the inner sect would they be considered a real disciple of the sect and learn the sect's mystic techniques. That's true. That disciple scratched his head and continued. I saw that Elder Lin was unhappy when he came back just now. Did anything happen in the assessment? Ning Luo wanted to say something, but when he thought of what Yi Yu said previously, a sly look emerged in his eyes. Nothing much actually. He just met with some irritating thing. This year, things are not as simple as just having only 2 disciples with green spirit roots in the outer sect. Other than that, our sect even accepted a young girl with a red spirit root as an exception. Red spirit root? The disciple's eyes almost fell out when he heard it. Are you joking? How can a red spirit root enter the sect? Ning Luo laughed. It is no longer important whether it is possible or not. What is important is that the person has already entered our outer sect. That disciple's expression turned weird. Ning Luo did not say anything else to him, and his mind was preoccupied on another matter. Yi Qingtang was the person whom Yi Yu wanted him to give special treatment to. Previously, when Yi Yu's letter mentioned Yi Qingtang, Ning Luo was not concerned about it. After all, Yi Yu did clearly write that Yi Qingtang was only a red spirit root. Ning Luo originally thought that it was definitely impossible for such a person to enter Xianling sect. Yet, unexpectedly, things did not go as one wished. Ning Luo was very clear that none of the sects would make an exception for anyone to accept them as a disciple. If they did not pass the assessment, the sect would not give the mighty figures any face regardless of who they are. He really did not expect Yi Qingtang to pass the Xianling sect entrance assessment with a red spirit root. However, a smile hung on Ning Luo's lips. Regardless of how Yi Qingtang entered Xianling sect, she was already a Xianling sect disciple from the moment she entered the sect. If she was someone Yi Yu wanted to take care of, he would naturally not let Yi Qingtang be too happy in Xianling sect. Come here. Ning Luo waved at a disciple nearby who went forward immediately. Help me pass a message to Zhou Xian from the outer sect, Ning Luo said. Zhou Xian? Senior brother Ning, just tell me what you want me to pass on to him, replied the disciple very obediently. Ning Luo had outstanding skills and was one of the best amongst the inner sect disciples. Moreover, the sword faction's elder Lin favored him, and thus, he had a certain level of influence in the inner sect. Ning Luo smiled and had the person lean over as he quietly whispered something into his ears. After listening to it, the disciple could not help but look shocked. However, his face returned to normal very quickly. Senior brother Ning, I will definitely pass this message. Go ahead. Ning Luo waved a hand without emotions. Yes. Looking at that disciple's departing back view, the smile on Ning Luo's face deepened. Yi Qingtang, I will definitely take care of you well. On behalf of Yi Yu, you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.